It is the Awesemo NBA Deeper Dive, sponsored by Prize Picks, and we have got a fun NBA slate. And just like there's going to be a lot of late scratches and swaps in the NBA, it wasn't any different for our shows today because it was originally supposed to be Aton hosting the Deeper Dive, and it was going to be then me doing live before lock, but Aton got stuck in traffic. He had some issues at work. So then we had Terry was going to do it, but then he had to switch with me. So it was all kinds of late swapping, which is very emblematic, like I said, of what this slate is going to be like. How you feel about all these injuries, Steve?
And this slate is going to be what I would call one of probably the number one slate that's more like last year's slate so far. It feels like most of the slates this year so far, we've had it almost a little bit easy, but not tonight. Tonight, there's got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, and before we go into the game by game, I'm going to just read off some of these injuries here so everybody gets an idea of what we're working with right at the top. Anthony Davis, questionable. Donovan Mitchell, questionable. Kristaps Porzingis, questionable. John Collins, questionable. Furkan Korkmaz, questionable. Kyle Lowry, questionable. Royce O'Neal, questionable. Danny Green, questionable. Cameron Payne, questionable. Josh Richardson, questionable. If you're playing tonight's slate, you're going to need to be by your computer because there's going to be a good chance there's going to be a lot of late swaps. Now, Steve, you and I haven't really talked about very many basketball slates together. We've done some football slates. But I'm kind of curious, just as an overarching view. I think we could talk some strategy at the top here because it's a 5-game slate. What is your process for late swap? Like, how will you be handling this slate as you make your you make your lineups ahead of time?
Yeah, so definitely you're going to want to be ready and paying attention to all of our updates throughout the night. We're quick to make those updates each and every night as news gets announced, and there's going to be a fair amount of news. So I'm definitely paying attention, hanging out here. Maybe we'll be watching UFC fight tonight. We were talking about that there beforehand. That's a good thing. Hang out, look at some NFL stats, watch the MMA fight, and I guess jump over the computer anytime that we need to. But the major thing that I'll be watching out for, and we'll go through it on these specific players, but if major players become must-have type plays, I'm definitely going to be very aggressive onto swapping those into my lineups. I think it is, especially on a weekend, people are really a lot less likely to be there to swap. So I think you have a good chance to garner that edge. It's not one that you can just say, I feel like, this is a play that is probably optimal, but I'm a little bit lazy tonight, so I'm not going to do it. I don't think that is the strategy that you should take in that situation. And these are big possibilities too. So yeah, lots of stuff going on, and I'll be pretty aggressive on it.
Yeah, we've got key players who are either ruled out or questionable. We've got Anthony Davis questionable, and what's more certain than an Anthony Davis with an injury tag, but he's questionable to play in the last start time of the night. So that is going to be pivotal. But let's start with the first game on the slate, and once again, one with injury news on both sides. Let's start on the Utah Jazz side, playing in Miami, two of the better defenses in the NBA. For the Utah Jazz, we have Donovan Mitchell listed as questionable. Royce O'Neal is questionable. It appears Mike Conley is going to play, which is a little odd to me, just considering this is a back-to-back situation. And we did see the Utah Jazz say only a week ago that they did not expect Mike Conley to play in back-to-backs this year. Lo and behold, we are not very deep into the season, and we've got Mike Conley potentially playing today and tomorrow, which maybe speaks to the fact that Donovan Mitchell potentially not playing today because the Jazz are on the schedule for tomorrow as well. But starting with the injuries here, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal. I think Donovan Mitchell probably a little more likely to sit than O'Neal, just given that Donovan Mitchell sat in the Jazz's last game. If he's out, what stands out to you?
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a plan to go by if Mitchell sits out this game, and luckily we'll have that news in time. In that game, Clarkson got 31 minutes. He kind of broke the slate with a 40 burger. And at his price point, if he, gets a lot of good minutes, I think that he's going to be in a pretty good spot. He's a pretty high usage player in general. And without Mitchell, that just even opens things up. He feels more comfortable shooting even more than normal. So I think he would be a pretty good spot. I think you would probably don't have to have him. His price is like a fair spot, but I think that you would want to definitely put him in the mix. The thing that probably the biggest risk is if you lock him in, you don't have as much flexibility for some of the later swapping that we might be having tonight. Ingles also grabbed some extra minutes, so I think he's already a guy that I think is not a great play, but he's a guy that I think you can kind of fill out your roster with, especially on DraftKings. His price at 4,900 is pretty fair there, and those extra minutes are going to put him to where again, he's not a must play, but I think he would probably be a guy that you might want in about a fifth of your lineups or something like that. And then we saw Trent Forrest get in the rotation. He's not something that we're really concerned about, but he will probably eat up the majority of the other minutes again, I would assume.
Yeah, and just pulling up here some of the on-off court numbers for the Jazz. This captures the first couple weeks of this season and dating back to last year. When Donovan Mitchell is off the court, Rudy Gobert, he's the best fantasy producer on the team, but whatever, that's something just to be expected. Mike Conley sees increased usage and overall fantasy production, scoring 1.18 DraftKings points per minute. The advantage to Conley goes twofold. Number one, there's a little more usage. Also, the ball in his hands more often without Mitchell on the court. He's responsible for more playmaking. Jordan Clarkson sees the biggest usage bump, 31.3% usage rate for him when Donovan Mitchell's off the court. And then Joe Ingles, like you mentioned before, there's no real usage bump to Joe Ingles, but he becomes more viable because he goes from a guy who plays, low to mid 20 minutes off the bench to a guy who now starts and then plays significant minutes, which we've seen from Joe Ingles in the past. Whenever he starts, it's a role he's thrived in for fantasy purposes, and not because he's all of a sudden like a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy, but because we often see him play north of 30 minutes and start. So those are the guys that I'd really be latching onto. Rudy Gobert, I think he's somebody, if you get to, I have no real issue with it, but there's likely going to be better centers that we want to play today. And the one thing that does hurt Rudy Gobert for me is I just don't want to use up that much roster space for a guy who's kind of a mediocre play right at the start of a slate. We're probably going to want to have a lot of flexibility for late swaps. All right, did you have something you want to add to that?
Just really quickly on Gobert, I do think that he has one interesting aspect is a lot of the centers that you're talking about are going to be cheaper. So he is a different guy that you could use to build your lineups a little bit differently. His boom score on DK and FanDuel, I guess, actually both are in the 22% range with low ownership, around 10% on both sites. So I don't think that that's like a terrible spot to go to, and just to get a little bit different.
Yeah, fair enough. If there was, and it's not that I think Rudy Gobert individually is a terrible play for this slate. I just want to give myself as much flexibility as possible, which is why I'm probably going to be manually bumping his projection down just to give myself as much flexibility as possible. But who knows? Maybe an hour from now, we found out a bunch of guys that were expected to be out or questionable or guys that are questionable end up playing, and then it becomes less pertinent. But for now, once again, a lot of injury news there, and injury news on the other side of this game too. The Miami Heat, Kyle Lowry is listed as questionable to play. And Kyle Lowry, who has been dealing with kind of a foot/heel injury, is something that bothered him a couple of games ago. He had to leave last game early. I thought when he first got hurt that he was going to be out for an extended period of time. So I'm a little surprised to see him listed as questionable on the injury report today. My expectation is that Kyle Lowry is not going to play, but once again, just an educated guess that I don't know for sure. Do you have any kind of lean on whether Kyle Lowry is going to be in or out today?
Probably slightly towards the out as well, but maybe like 70% out. Not super strong.
Yeah, and that's a reasonable way to look at it. Another thing to consider too: first game of the slate, we're going to know ahead of time whether he is going to be in or out. But looking at some of the on-off court numbers here, the best fantasy producers on the Miami Heat this year, and Kyle Lowry's off the court. No real surprises here. Jimmy Butler has a 28.5% usage rate. He scores 1.25 fantasy points per minute. Bam Adebayo, one thing that's interesting about Bam, his assist rate has plummeted this year, playing alongside a point guard like Kyle Lowry. I think we could see Bam Adebayo's assist rate jump back to what it's been last year and in previous years if Kyle Lowry doesn't play. So that's kind of a hidden little bit of upside for him. And then Tyler Hero as well, 29.5% usage rate, 1.21 fantasy points per minute when Kyle Lowry's off the court. So I think all three of those guys become stronger plays without Lowry. Do you agree with that? And is there anybody else you would add to the mix as a good play from Miami without Lowry?
Yeah, so that's a pretty interesting thought on Bam. I hadn't thought about that one, but I think that one is one that I'll keep in mind. I agree completely with Hero. He had a really nice game last time. He also picked up an additional 4 or 5 minutes versus normal rotation without Lowry. So I think that he would go from what is already a pretty good play to a really solid play if Lowry were to miss, as we're kind of expecting here. Duncan Robinson kind of, I think, would also fall in that same category. And on the cheap side, he's not someone that is too often going to blow up the slate by any means, but he gets a few extra minutes. He's already a good value on DraftKings again at 4,100. I think that's a pretty fair price for him. And with a few extra minutes, I think he would probably be a guy that would pop up a little bit and not someone that is going to be super high owned. He is getting a little bit of ownership though, actually, 12% in our most recent run. So that's a little bit higher than what I would have thought for him. So maybe he's not quite as good from that standpoint, but I kind of would guess the under on that projection. And then the other guy that I think we saw get quite a few minutes last time was Gabe Vincent. He got into the rotation. He's never going to be a high points per minute guy on this Heat team, I don't think, although he did in the past have some had some periods where he was putting up decent points per minute. He with his 25 minutes last time, he got 7 DraftKings points, which didn't do much for anyone that got on him last time. But you might expect him to do a little bit better this time. He couldn't do any worse. And at 3,200, I think that's a fair price on DraftKings. Maybe not as much on the other sites, but on DraftKings, getting to him might not be a bad idea.
And then let's look at this from the other angle too, because 5 games, so we've got some wiggle room stuff to talk about here. If Kyle Lowry plays, I'm not going to have that much interest in the Heat side of this game. You can make a case for Lowry himself on FanDuel 5,900. If he plays, it's early in the season. I just have to assume he's fine with no restrictions. I don't think the Heat would go run him out on the court if he was, say, like 50 or 60%. So Lowry plays, I assume we get full go of him. I'm good with firing him at 5,900, but that kind of neuters the value of everybody else on this team to me. If Lowry is in, is there anybody that would stand out to you as a good play for Miami?
Yeah, I think you could go still with Butler and Bam, of course. There's a chance that, I also assumed that Lowry would play full go. But we saw yesterday with Drew that wasn't necessarily the case also. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that he's a little bit less than 100%. At 5,900 on FanDuel, that is a really good price, as well as 2,300 on Yahoo. The 7,700 on DraftKings is just too much for Lowry. No reason to take a chance with him there. So
speak of the devil, Kyle Lowry ruled in. We got the official news from News God himself, and it's funny. You and I were talking about before, like, should we maybe consider switching the order of the games, because you never know when the news is going to break. This very apt timing. We're just to bring up the potential options of Kyle Lowry. He's officially in, as we're talking about what do we do if Kyle Lowry's in. So once again, for me, I think that what stands out the most for Miami, if you could only roster one guy from the Heat on DraftKings or FanDuel today, it would be Kyle Lowry from a 5,900. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I think that's good. It would probably be him or just Butler, just for the upside that he offers for me.
All right, so we've knocked one injury off the list and moving on, because there are plenty of more injuries to cover. Next game, the Philadelphia 76ers at the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls, shockingly good defense to enter the season. I thought their offense potentially could be really good this year, but I thought there would be some issues with chemistry. I thought their defense would probably be bad, and not the case. They're among the league leaders in defensive efficiency so far this year. So the Philadelphia 76ers matchup maybe a little more difficult than we otherwise would have thought. And the injury situation, once again, for the Philadelphia 76ers. Furkan Korkmaz, questionable to play. Danny Green, questionable to play. Makes it a little hard to know what to do with value here. But if both of these guys are out, there's certainly going to be value on the Philadelphia wing. Who would be the player that stands out to you the most if the Sixers are playing without Green and Korkmaz tonight?
So this game is 8 Eastern time. So we have a chance to know this information, but it's 50-50 kind of. The thing at the games that are a half hour after the lock, I always want to have a game plan for what's going to happen, because it's very likely you get the news like 5 minutes before lock, and you need to be able to adjust your lineups quickly. So one thing that I like to do in a situation like this is kind of build some lineups that are both viable in the case that one or the other, plays or doesn't play. This one's a little bit tougher though, because it's two guys. Yeah. So you have like a more difficult permutation there. So I'll probably just mix in a bunch of extra Philadelphia guys in some lineups and just kind of try to pick those different scenarios. If I guess let's start with Korkmaz and Green both playing, I guess. Mm-hmm. In that case, I think Korkmaz is actually a pretty good play. We have him projected for pretty good minutes, around 30 right now, which puts him as a 41% boom score versus 15% ownership. I don't think people are going to be clamoring to play Korkmaz there, especially if he's questionable. So I think that makes him a really nice play in this situation. And if he then gets ruled out, you can always late swap, right? Or have these plan of what you're going to do with some of your lineups in that scenario. If I don't think I'm really interested in Green if he's playing either way, so maybe that's one of the guys that you can kind of eliminate from that process. If they're both out, then it really opens up a ton of value, since we already have Tobias Harris out, we already have Thibault out. I think it really makes it pretty interesting for everyone that's left, essentially. Tyrese Maxey, Niang, Shake Milton would be in a really good spot. There's been a few times already this year that we've seen him be the mega chalk. I think this would probably be another one of those situations where he could be one of the higher owned guys on the slate. So maybe build a lot of lineups with him, and just in case we get that news right before lock.
The one that would be hard for me to avoid is Tyrese Maxey, who I'm also going to have such a difficult time figuring out the minutes for later in the day, because he played 45 minutes last game, Steve. And I don't like to project somebody for that ridiculous amount of minutes. But then you start to look at the 76ers depth chart and you go like, all right, if there's no Korkmaz, there's no Danny Green, Thibault's already out. We know there's no Tobias Harris. Ben Simmons, we know his situation. Isaiah Joe is out too. There's only so many guys they could go to. And then you start to say like, okay, who is going to play the point guard minutes for the 76ers tonight? And, or the guard minutes. You've got Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry, Shake Milton. That's kind of it if Korkmaz and Danny Green are both out. So I won't project Tyrese Maxey for 45 minutes, but I'm going to have in the back of my head, there's a chance that this guy plays 45 minutes again. So I'm going to look at Tyrese Maxey as somebody I really want to get to. I've been against George Niang this year, and I've just been incorrect about that. I should have been playing more George Niang. He's played extremely well as of late. Also, the minutes. I thought that there was no way the Sixers were going to play him as many minutes as he has played, but 31 minutes, 32 minutes, 32 minutes in the last 3 games. So he's somebody else I think we should bank on for bigger minutes. But now I want to ask you about Joel Embiid as a potential pay-up option for this slate, because as good as the Sixers have played this year, they are the number 1 record in the Eastern Conference this year. They have the number 1 offensive efficiency in the Eastern Conference. And this is with Joel Embiid largely sucking for fantasy purposes. He has 1 double-double this year. He has scored over 22 points once this entire year. This offense has still managed to be great, but are you at all concerned that with Joel Embiid, some of the issues that he's been complaining about, his knee bothers him after games? Do you think that's limiting him and the amount of minutes that the Sixers are playing him on the court?
Yeah, I think you almost have to assume so at this point. There's no reason for them to really push him this early in the season. They have higher aspirations, I think, still at this point than games right now. We'll see if those aspirations continue. But I think that they are at least going to continue to go under that assumption for right now. So I don't think he has nearly the upside as what he had previously. He could certainly go out today and score 70 points, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I don't think it's as likely in his range of outcomes as maybe what it was last year. So he's not someone that I'm going to go overboard on, but he does have a pretty low ownership because of the way that he's been playing recently. So I do think that he makes sense as kind of a contrarian, kind of the same way as Gobert, where, it's a pay up option to get a little bit different than all the people that are paying up for Westbrook or Luka or, someone like that.
Yeah, I think that especially if we're going to get a lot of value, I'll be looking to take some chance at Embiid, because if everything breaks right for us, this could be a thing we get into lock. It's like I have space to pay up for 2 or 3 stars in all my lineups tonight. So that is something that'll also impact how I view Embiid. But right now, kind of a low priority pay up option for me, especially as we talk about the later games. I might really be wanting to get into Russell Westbrook. From the Chicago Bulls standpoint, there's not really a lot I like here. If you're playing 150 lineups and you get to a few lineups here and there of a few of these guys, I have no problem with it. But once again, this is a slate with a lot of value options. And the Bulls are one of the only teams that have everybody that's a core player for them healthy at the moment. Patrick Williams out for the season, but at this point, that's already been accounted for in the pricing on DraftKings. And I still don't know what to make of the usage between Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, Lonzo Ball going forward this year. I think these guys are all going to eat into each other's production. So I'm not sure we see any of them on optimal lineups too often this year. But do you see the Bulls any differently? Is there one guy that stands out for you?
No, I think that's the case. A lot of the times you're going to be having all those four guys kind of negating each other and making it so that no one stands out any given time. And that's what you're going to see in the projections also, which limits their ownership as well. So I do think that there are some times where you could see a spike game from any of those four guys, and they're going to be at depressed ownership where you can really take over the slate. Because I would say pretty much, I don't know that, I guess maybe Lonzo Ball doesn't have quite as much upside as the other three, but I feel like the other three, any given point, if they really get hot and get fed the ball consistently or something like that, they could really have a blow up spot and kind of break the slate. I don't necessarily see that that's going to happen any given day, but yeah, I think it could happen. DeRozan is probably the best value. He's been pretty consistent in mid 30s. He's only been below 40 points once this year, and 50 points, DK points, I'm talking here, in the back-to-back games. So I think that he makes a good spot, especially right now where we don't have as much value. I think, and it's a little bit harder to get to the very upper range. Once we get a few guys, that end up sitting, it might be a little bit easier to go up to like Embiid instead of DeRozan. But right now, I think he makes a lot of sense. The other one that I'm a little bit curious on your thought also is Javonte Green. He's been starting the last 3 games. He hasn't really. So one thing that I guess that's a little bit tough for him is playing with all 4 of those guys. They're going to demand the ball. They're high priority type of players. So his production hasn't really been great. He's averaging about 16 to 17 DK points in that time frame, which is a fair amount of points for his price point. But I do think that he could potentially, if he just gets a few extra minutes and gets maybe a little bit hot, he could potentially be an okay guy.
Yeah, I get that reasoning. For me, it's just about opportunity cost, where I look at somebody like Javonte Green and look at all the guys who are questionable to play today. And let's say we find out later in the day that Anthony Davis isn't playing. I'm going to feel pretty bummed out that I used Javonte Green in roster spots when there's all that Lakers value that opens up. So if we find out that Anthony Davis is playing, then it would be a different situation with Javonte Green, or maybe some of these other guys end up playing. But I just don't want to lock in a roster spot with Javonte Green, who this year is averaging 13.16 DraftKings points in 18 minutes per game. Last year, he averaged 7.85 and 11.6 minutes per game. So he's a guy who, even if we were to give him 30 minutes, I'm probably projecting him for 22, 23 fantasy points. Not bad for his salary, but my hunch is that we're just going to see better values projected as the night rolls on.
Yep, I think that's fair. And that's mostly where I stand as well. But we'll see how things play out.
All right, the next game we have here, it is the Boston Celtics on the road at the Dallas Mavericks. But first, guys, I want to point out that we do have some free content today over at Awesemo.com. I believe it is the player projections today. So that is something that's going to be very important, especially for something like this. If you guys are not yet an Awesemo Plus member, but maybe you want to check it out, some of the content we have behind the paywall, check out the projections we have for free. They're going to be updated as all of the information comes out. Also, if you guys are new to Awesemo Plus and want to sign up and get access to all the tools we have for every NBA, every DFS sport, including NBA, you get a weekly pass for $29.95. You could also use the promo code NBA Live before lock for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're only looking to play NBA DFS, we do have NBA weekly packages for as low as $4.95. So lots of good ways to check out our content, get behind the paywall, and see some of the tools that we have that help guys like Steve and I win some money at NBA DFS. All right, moving on, we have the Boston Celtics at the Dallas Mavericks. And starting with the Boston side of the game, shocking, Steve. We've got an injury here, but at least this one, not somebody who's questionable. We have Jaylen Brown has officially been ruled out. And I understand all the reservations about Jason Tatum. He's sucked this year. He has, and also if you look at his shooting splits, it's really bizarre because to me, I attribute a lot of Tatum's struggles this year just to to shot selection. He's taking the least amount of shots at the rim that he's taken at any point in his career, something that's gone down each year he's been in the league. His mid-range shots have gone up. The amount of shots that he's taken that have been challenged by a defender have gone up. So it seems like he's almost going out of his way to take more difficult shots for himself. I think that's something that's going to correct itself. And we've got no Jaylen Brown in the mix. That should mean a lot of usage going to Tatum. I really like getting to Tatum. I'm going to ignore the first 2 games of the season and the struggles he's had. He's a really good player. He's going to turn it around. Are you also going to be on Jason Tatum today?
So a question back to you on that. Do you think it's Tatum having an issue getting to the rim more? Like he's just not able to get to the rim as easily as he once could? Or is it more his ability, just taking it, kind of slacking off and taking those shots, I guess, more?
It's funny because this was one of the knocks on him coming out of college at Duke is really questionable shot selection. And also something that's kind of always been attributed to it is that he's always looked up to Kobe Bryant. A lot of people would say, like, is he too influenced by Kobe Bryant? It's one where he's taking kind of these difficult mid-range jump shots because that's what he's modeled his game after. But he got away from it after college, and we started to see his shot selection improve when he got to the NBA. And it was kind of like, hey, you know what, better coaching, maybe it's something that's behind him. But it's kind of got away from him this year. And to the point where, just to reference the efficiency this year, he's shooting 37% from the field this year, 27% from 3. And I'll go to Basketball Reference and pull up some of those shooting splits. Off the top of my head, I believe he's taking 17% of his shots at the rim this year compared to something like 23% last year in his rookie year. He was somewhere around like 30% or 28%. That's right off the top of my head. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know I'm roundabout accurate. And I don't think he's only 23 years old. I don't think it's a thing where he's lost a step or anything. I just think it's poor decision-making. And, maybe it's the start of the year and he hasn't come in the best shape. But once again, I think it's something that's very easily correctable. And we're looking at a couple of guys who had really off shooting starts this season. Jason Tatum, Damian Lillard. I think everybody's going to be fine going forward. But anyway, bigger picture. Jaylen Brown is out. Jason Tatum is going to have to take a lot of shots today. So I'm going to be on Tatum. And I know it's a little bit of a long way to get around that. I like Tatum today, despite the questionable shot selection.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's really good information. That wasn't something that I had noticed either. So today will be a really good test to see if he does start taking the ball to the rim a little bit more often, since he's going to have to be the guy that they're relying on completely tonight without Brown in there. So I'll take a chance that this is the spot that they have it. That gives him a little bit additional upside to his efficiency and his points per minute of DraftKings points. So yeah, I already thought he was a pretty good play, but that gives me a little bit more confidence in his ability. One other thing that I did want to note, that normally it wouldn't be a big deal, and I wouldn't even kind of bring up Josh Richardson being questionable. But with Brown out, we are giving a fair amount of minutes to Richardson, 18 right now, as well as Nesmith is kind of eating up a lot of the minutes too. And if Richardson were to sit also, then the minutes will start getting even more dicey. Not quite to the extent that Philadelphia is in, but that would also be some extra minutes to Smart, Pritchard, and probably Schroeder as well. All those guys are already, because of Brown being out, guys that I think that you could certainly consider. Schroeder in particular at 5,400, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think if he gets a few extra minutes, then he's going to be somebody that we really want to consider for our lineups pretty heavily.
Right. And updating a piece of news, Donovan Mitchell playing today, Royce O'Neal playing today. So scratch all of the Jazz value. Those guys are not going to be values today, and kind of makes the Jazz a little bit uninteresting on this slate. There's always upside in individual guys like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, but we could scratch off the guys like Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson we're talking about before. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that would probably be the case.
All right. And now one other guy I want to bring up from the Celtics, and I agree with you on everything with Josh Richardson there. I think that he is somebody who potentially stands to gain a lot. The other one is Dennis Schroeder. Particularly if Josh Richardson's out, you just start to look at this team and you say, where is the offense coming from? I could be Al Horford, but with that said, it's not like the Celtics, I expect them to regularly be playing him 36 minutes or anything like that. And he's also been way priced up, particularly on DraftKings. So Al Horford's not something I'm dying to get to. But Dennis Schroeder, I think you just start to look at this offense and say, who is the shot creator on this team? And it's Dennis Schroeder stands out to me in the mid-range. So I like Dennis Schroeder without Jaylen Brown. Do you think he could be the secondary scoring option for Boston today without Brown.
Yeah, especially if Richardson is out and he gets a few extra minutes, I think he's really good shape. Even without those extra minutes, I think he's going to be in pretty good shape to be a good player as well. He's at 35% boom rating for us. I do think that the one that could be a little bit interesting, you did mention Horford is priced up so much, and 7,600 seems like a really high price in a vacuum for Horford, and 28 on Yahoo as well. But in our boom bust tool, he is booming at a pretty high rate, about 38% on both DraftKings and FanDuel, and his ownership is in the teens. Looks like he's a little bit higher owned on FanDuel, but that makes him look pretty decent to me there as well. It wasn't someone that I came in thinking about originally as being that guy, but him and Robert Williams as well. He also stands to gain a fair amount from that. So I think it's a lot of them getting some extra rebounding opportunities. And yeah, against Dallas, I think Dallas isn't going to be coming with the biggest team, especially if Porzingis is out. So I think that could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and something else to consider here is I was talking about opportunity cost of value plays, and since we've started talking about the games earlier, we've already had Donovan Mitchell ruled in, Royce O'Neal ruled in, Kyle Lowry ruled in, so potential for less value than we thought could be available to us earlier, which could make somebody like Al Horford a little bit better of a play, even if the price tag is a little bit inflated. But now talking about the Dallas side of the game, you hit on it right there. Kristaps Porzingis is questionable to play. He said he felt fine when he first hurt his back, but he hasn't played since. So I don't know if he was really feeling all that good. If he ends up playing, I don't think there's a whole lot to see here other than the obvious of Luka Doncic being a viable pay-up option. If Porzingis is out, though, we've got Jalen Brunson's been starting and putting up big numbers. We've got Dwight Powell who's played bigger minutes, especially because Maxi Kleber is out. So with Kristaps Porzingis, who are you going to be looking at if he doesn't play?
Yeah, so definitely Jalen Brunson. He's not the guy that you just look at the Dallas roster and you wouldn't think, oh, Jalen Brunson is going to be the guy that's the biggest beneficiary of Porzingis missing, but he sure seems like he is. That's been a few games now, right? We've had 4 games I think that he's missed, and 51 points from Brunson last game, 34 the game before that. He did have a lighter game the one before that, but these last 2 are the ones that he started. So if we see him starting and getting big minutes again, I think that he is definitely someone that you want to consider. I do think Powell also makes a lot of sense. He gets some extra looks and playing time without Porzingis also, and then you always kind of also wonder if there's ever going to be a random Boban start as well. Boban got a few minutes last game, so yeah, I mean it's possible that could be in the looks. Was that yesterday? No, that was a few days ago. So he could be well rested. I don't know how long Boban's rest for 10 minutes is, but one thing that I think also gets mentioned a lot is Luka doesn't really get as much of a bump as you might expect without Porzingis. So I think he's a good play either way, but his ownership normally bumps up a lot if Porzingis misses, especially if we get the news before lock that Porzingis is out, which, maybe I'm leaning a little bit towards him missing again just because he's missed so many in a row. But so yeah, I think Luka is interesting both cases.
And then one thing about with Porzingis is if he doesn't have any kind of minutes restriction, I think he'd be an interesting play on FanDuel just for the shot blocking ability. Also, there's a chance we won't get news on him being in or out until after the slate locks, which in that case, we could get Porzingis, who we know is immense fantasy upside, at like 3, 4, 5% ownership. So he's somebody I will be looking to swap onto if he ends up getting ruled in late. And as for Luka, yeah, it is funny because one thing I always say about Luka is, sure, he doesn't get a real bump when Porzingis off the court, but it's still Luka Doncic. Like there's still a significant fantasy upside there. So it's always been something I don't really care about too much. But like you said, maybe that does inflate his usage a little, his ownership a little bit. So that'll certainly be something to keep an eye on. Next game that we have here to talk about, it is the Atlanta Hawks on the road against the Phoenix Suns. And guess what, Steve? Injury situation. John Collins questionable to play. Nobody else who's on the injury report of note right now for the Atlanta Hawks. If John Collins is out, I really like this spot for Clint Capella. He's going up against a Phoenix Suns front court that's already missing DeAndre Ayton. This could be a game where Clint Capella goes out and pulls down 18 rebounds, 20 rebounds, or something like that if there's no John Collins. Collins is cut into some of the counting stats of Capella, but that would be an excellent matchup for Clint Capella going up against the likes of Frank Kaminsky and JaVale McGee in the front court without John Collins. So somebody I would really like without Collins is Capella. What stands out to you here?
Yeah, Capella for sure. I think is the big beneficiary there from the starters. I think they don't typically allow Capella to go big on the minutes, so he might not get any extra playing time. But I agree, that's a matchup that he should be able to rebound really well in. I mean, he should be able to rebound really well even if Collins is playing too, right? So I think that he's in a good spot either way. Just give him an extra bump if we see Collins is out. I think it would be really interesting to see how they go with the minutes without Collins. I'm not 100% sure how they're going to go that way. So that's a little bit of a tricky situation on trying to plug in some of the backups into your lineups ahead of time, because we haven't seen the current team without any games without Collins. We'd have to go all the way back to last year, which is fine, I guess, because a lot of the Atlanta rotation is similar to last year. But you'd probably, I think, see a fair amount of minutes from Jang, some extra minutes from Hunter and Gallo. And I think that if, like, say, Jang were to start potentially, I think that he might be playable. And I think, like, Gallo and Hunter with some extra minutes, I think, are both in play. I think Hunter is all the way down at 4,100 and at the minimum of 10 on Yahoo. I think those are both pretty fair prices for Hunter anyway. So maybe Hunter is a guy that you kind of put into some of your lineups early, and it's only a bonus if you get Collins out.
You know who's been a lost man for Atlanta this year? Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter was so good for the Hawks in the playoffs. He signs a big extension in the offseason. Then the season starts. He's barely part of the team. To the point where a week ago, he was not even in the rotation for one of those games. So I kind of wonder if they might just go small and potentially start Kevin Huerter. I think that is something that's kind of sneaky potential to happen if there's no John Collins. That my guesses would be it's either Cam Reddish, Danilo Gallinari, or Kevin Huerter that start. Gallo, they've really limited the minutes this year. Reddish has played really well, but Kevin Huerter would be my dark horse choice to enter the starting lineup. Just kind of the forgotten man there for Atlanta. Nobody's been playing him in DFS this year because, I mean, the Hawks aren't even playing him in real life, so it makes sense. But that's something I would be considering for sure. And then Trae Young is a potential pay-up option. Not a priority for me. There's other guys I'd rather get to. But with that said, if I get to Young, I'm not going to be upset about it. He's somebody who's also been hurt by these new foul rules in the NBA. He's been complaining about it a ton to the media about how he's not getting foul calls anymore. It's hurt his scoring a whole bunch this year. So Trae Young this year is averaging 22.4 points per game. Last year, he averaged 25.3. The year before that, 29.6. So not getting to the foul line as much. That's hurting his overall fantasy production and his ability to score the basketball. So once again, Trae Young is a pay-up option. If I get to him in a few lineups here or there, sure, but other priorities for me. Do you feel any differently about Trae Young?
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty much how I would categorize Trae Young. If you wanted to get to him, it looks like there is a pretty big price discrepancy over at FanDuel at 8,500 versus DraftKings at 9,700. So you could go the FanDuel route and maybe fade him on DraftKings. But outside of that, I think pretty much everything you said is what I agree with.
All right. By the way, I have not hawked for likes yet this show. So guys, do us a favor. If you're watching, like this video and do it now with urgency, because I don't want people to think I'm filling in on this deeper dive on late notice and doing shit for the likes. I need to get the likes up there so that they let me come back in this role so that I could go to eat dinner at a reasonable time. So do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks, who are bringing prop-based daily fantasy sports contests. So you build player prop cards, and there's a couple different ways to play. You can go to flex play, where you can build a card. You only have to get two out of three of them right to make money. Or you go with the power play, where if you go 3 of 3, you get 5x your entry. Also, if you're new to Prize Picks, you sign up right now. Use the promo code Awesemo, get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. And another thing that's really cool about Prize Picks, we've got a lot of really good free prop projections over on Awesemo.com. And you can compare some of the numbers that we've projected in our props tool to what we have over at Prize Picks, and you can see where some of the best value is. We have stuff, you go to over to Odd Shopper, you could sort all of the lines that are available across all sports books. You could sort them by expected ROI, expected win rate. So look through some of those, find some of those lines, compare them to what's over at Prize Picks. Really good way to find some Prize Picks value over there. All right. The next side of this game, we've got the Phoenix Suns, and we have to talk about the front court here because there is no DeAndre Ayton for the Phoenix Suns again, and it's kind of a weird situation, right? Because DeAndre Ayton was out. He was listed as questionable. He played. He was listed as questionable again. So I just assume, all right, I guess Ayton's going to be in, and then we find that he's not going to be playing. But where the real discussion point comes here, Steve, JaVale McGee versus Frank Kaminsky. Where do you stand on these two guys? JaVale McGee got the start last game, but it was Frank Kaminsky who had the bigger fantasy night. So who do you prefer, or do you just like both of them?
So I'm really glad we got this news early. Last game, Ayton ended up playing, and I had all of the Kaminsky and McGee and nowhere to go with it. I thought Ayton wasn't going to play that game, and that was a unfortunate scenario. And clearly, the fact that he's already ruled out early today makes sense that was the right answer. But oh well, we don't get paid off sometimes. Anyways, but between the two, so yeah, like you said, we got 28 minutes for Kaminsky off the bench and had the big smash play. He did start the second half over McGee. My guess is probably McGee will start again. I don't necessarily have a strong lean on that necessarily, maybe like 60% or so, but I think both of them make a lot of sense. Someone was asking in chat, does it make sense to play both of them together? A lot of times you would say guys that are going to be split in their time where one hurts the other. No, it doesn't make sense to play both of them together. But the thing is, they're 3,700 and 3,400. So I think you can make a case, just like last game, even McGee, even though he did get hurt by Kaminsky, it actually still paid off. He's been getting in the 20-point range all of his games. I'm pretty sure the winning lineup that day had McGee in their lineup anyways. So I think you can play them. I'm not going to make any rule that says I can't play them together. Maybe a slight bump down to having them together in the same lineup. But just because of their price point, I would think that that's okay. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so they played all the center minutes last game, and it was 28 minutes for Kaminsky and 20 minutes for JaVale McGee. Just checking to make sure I had that correct. And by the way, we're looking 2 games ago because last game DeAndre Ayton came back, so alternating games with and without DeAndre Ayton. So yeah, 2 games. It was 28 minutes for Frank Kaminsky and 20 minutes for JaVale McGee. Now, I think a split like that is possible, but keep in mind, Frank Kaminsky played one of his best games in recent memory that night. That's the reason why Frank Kaminsky started in the second half. It's also the reason that Kaminsky got a little bit more minutes than McGee. I tend to, unless we see Kaminsky start, if Kaminsky starts, I'll change my opinion on this. But as of now, I have it projected 24 minutes for each of them. I think that's a prudent way to go about it. It also means that when I'm ultimately running my lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, I'm going to be getting about split exposure to them. They're both really good pointsmen fantasy producers. So the long answer, or the short answer, is play both of them. The long answer is there's a lot of variability here, and I don't exactly know what the minutes are going to look like, but I'm kind of assuming JaVale McGee starts and they just split the minutes down the middle, 24-24.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. McGee is a little bit better on a per minute basis normally, but I mean, you can definitely see Kaminsky have one of those games. He just kind of comes. What it feels like a lot of times with Kaminsky is he's just on the bench for weeks at a time, and then just kind of comes up with this spot start and just kind of blows up, and then goes back to the bench for weeks. That's been the case for like the last few years on him. It feels like he'll normally win me some random showdown slate or something, and I'll be like, all right, that's the Kaminsky that I've been playing him for all this time, but. That's just the way he is anyways. And, you kind of hope that that's the case today. And I think it could be. Of the other guys on the team, I think Bridges also makes a lot of sense. He's probably going to get some extra rebounds without Ayton in the lineup. So we have him getting a boom score of 15% on DraftKings compared to his ownership of 16, which is about equal. And then I think you never can complain about going with Booker or Paul. Both of those make a lot of sense. Paul down at 8,400 is certainly a fair price on DraftKings, and then Booker at $32 on Yahoo, I think looks pretty appealing as well.
Yeah, once again, not really high priority plays on the high end, and the reason being, are you ready to talk about the big injury of the night, Steve? The one that's going to be giving us headaches, probably potentially even after the game starts. The Los Angeles Lakers. Anthony Davis is listed as questionable. LeBron James is out. The Lakers, I think they're being a little bit too liberal with these games off for LeBron James because the team looks not great right now, and I think this team runs into some risk, which I've been tweeting about since the start of the season. If LeBron's going to miss a lot of time this year, the Lakers are no lock to make the playoffs. This is a pretty iffy roster they have here. Anthony Davis is listed as questionable play. Like I said, LeBron James is out. So let's go through a couple of scenarios here. First of all, do you have any kind of expectation or read on if Anthony Davis is going to be in or out?
No, I don't. I would guess it's hard to say with Davis. My guess is he would play, but maybe only like 70% chance that he would play.
Okay, yeah, I mean, they certainly need him out there, especially, I mean, they just lost at home to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Lakers were up. Yep. By the way, the Lakers have lost back-to-back games to the Thunder. They were up by like 30 points in one of those games. They're up 21 points in the other. They ended up losing both of those games. So, I mean, they really need AD out there. And if he's in, obviously, he's a fantastic fantasy play. And people might be scared shitless to roster this guy because we know about the injury situation. In fact, last game, he didn't start the second half. He hurts his thumb towards the end of the first half. He sits out the last 3 possessions. He's just sitting on the court holding his hand. And then you start to think, well, is he going to play in the second half? Is he not going to play? Carmelo Anthony ends up starting the second half over him. And then Anthony Davis comes running out of the locker room 3 minutes or like a couple minutes. And he plays like the entire second half. He doesn't go to the bench almost at all in the second half. So I think Anthony Davis is the best pay-up option on the slate if he ends up playing. Now, if he's out, Russell Westbrook, absolute no-brainer play. As bad as Russell Westbrook has been this year, he's still going to crush for fantasy purposes, maybe even as is without LeBron James, but certainly if Anthony Davis is out. So what do you make of now Russell Westbrook in the scenarios where we have Anthony Davis and the scenario without Anthony Davis?
Yeah, this is by far the most difficult because it's the last game of the slate also, and you're not going to have a lot of swap options. So either you're kind of swapping way down from Anthony Davis. You could I guess you could potentially on DraftKings, you could put Anthony Davis in the flex spot. He's at 10,500. Westbrook's at 10,900. So you could make sure that you had another player with Anthony Davis to be able to swap that way to Westbrook or have some salary left over. Neither, though, is a very optimal strategy by any means. If Davis plays, I agree that he's one of the best plays. They're going to rely on him very heavily. They are going to also he's also going to have very little ownership just because people are going to be scared to play them in that case. Probably me as well, to be honest. There's just no other way around it if we don't get the news until too late. And then Westbrook, if Davis is out, then Westbrook is a slam dunk play. He's going to be the best play on the slate, barring maybe Shake Milton or somebody if everyone's out on Philadelphia. But definitely Westbrook is the best pay up option. This is one of the more difficult plays for sure all season long, and how you handle it is going to probably be a big determiner if you win or lose tonight, unfortunately.
Yeah, and once again, this is the main reason you're going to have to be by your computer for this entire night. If you're watching UFC, bring a computer with you. If you're going out on a date with your girlfriend, bring a computer with you out to dinner. She'll understand. I'm sure that'll go over well and be totally reasonable. But and also say this, if you're not able to make late swaps tonight, do yourself a favor and don't play this slate because it's going to be very difficult to be profitable on this slate. If you're just approaching to like, hey, I don't want to roster Anthony Davis because he's questionable. I don't want to roster Russell Westbrook. I'm just going to go out and drink tonight. I recommend not doing that. You're better off taking the night off. There's a good chance you're going to be throwing away money in that situation. So make sure that you're available to late swap. And talking about the Russell Westbrook news, big reason why Russell Westbrook this year, when you take Anthony Davis and LeBron James off the court, Russell Westbrook 42.3% usage rate this year and is scoring 63.1 fantasy points per 36 minutes. And he might very well play 40 minutes if both those guys are out today. So Russell Westbrook will be either a lock or close to a lock play for me if there's no AD. Now, let's talk about value plays if Davis doesn't play. Which cheap players from Lakers do you think you want to get to?
Yeah, in that case, so we saw that Carmelo started the second half in place of Davis. we would have to assume that that's probably the most likely scenario. You could go with a smaller lineup and go with Monk, I guess, potentially. He's been starting for a few of the games. So, I mean, that's a possibility as well, or potentially even Ellington. But I think you have to give the benefit of the doubt to Carmelo to be there. So I think he would make a fair amount of sense with Davis out. I think you also probably get into some Monk or Ellington or Dwight Howard or Avery Bradley, pretty much everybody. Their prices are so far depressed because he's playing with those big three players that you could get all of those guys in the 3,000 price range. I guess Carmelo's in the upper fives, but everyone else is in the 3,000s. So, I mean, that's where it's nice to just, you could save a lot of flexibility if you make some rules potentially on your lineups that you have a fair amount of guys on these last couple of games, but then you're kind of also out of luck if Davis plays. So I don't know that there's a full 100% answer, but I would definitely be interested in all those players if Davis was out.
Yeah, once again, don't forget to be attentive to the news. We got the news guy on Negro Loco in our premium Discord channel. He's always on top of that stuff. Also, vote EMAC for president in 2024, because if he is nominated president, he will get you Anthony Davis injury news early every single day, guaranteed. So vote EMAC 2024. Also, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because EMAC demands it as our future president in 2024. Now, let's move on to the Portland side of the game, and let's talk about Dame time, which it's just lame time now, I guess. Like, what if Damian Lillard, what has happened to his ability to shoot the basketball? I don't know if you've heard some of these excuses, but it sounds very almost Jamar Chase-esque. Remember before the football season started, where Jamar Chase like, hey, I can't catch the football because it's different from the college football, and obviously that ended up being a total non-issue. We've got CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard saying the NBA changed balls in the offseason. That's impacting Dame's ability to shoot. Now, Damian Lillard, the last two seasons, shot 40% and 39% from three. He's shooting 21.7% from three this year. He's shooting 33.7% from the field. He has been the least valuable player on the Portland Trailblazers roster this season. And you know, it's funny, in the offseason, there was all these rumors about, will Damian Lillard want to get traded because can his team, this team is, any wins they have are despite Damian Lillard. He has been awful this year, but I like him for fantasy tonight. There's a lot of value to go to, and I just don't buy that he's going to continue to suck shooting this hard. There's going to be a point where Damian Lillard finally starts to hit shots. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the league. There's no way he maintains a 22% three-point shooting rate. So do you think this is the bounce back spot for Damian Lillard, Steve?
I'm hoping so, because he's not been very friendly to my lineups lately, because I keep betting on it being the case. Who's having the worst time shooting right now, Dame Lillard or Cade Cunningham? It's the guys that go by their first name, I guess, instead to most people that are causing an issue. But yeah, no, I think Lillard is a really good guy to pay up for. Hopefully at some point he will get shooting better. That's interesting on the ball theory. I hadn't heard that one. Something that certainly could be worth looking into. But I think him and McCollum, if there's anyone that, if there's any spot that you can get better on quickly, it's against the Lakers, as we've seen with Oklahoma City and Houston and everyone that they've played so far this year. So yeah, I think that this is a good spot and a good chance for him to get right tonight. I'll have a good amount of shares of those. That these guys might be some of the guys that I'm swapping to if it doesn't work out for Anthony Davis playing. But that's also another good reason to kind of put these guys into your lineup. It gives you some flexibility on who you want to swap to. So I'm all about playing those guys. You can even go with Anthony Simons a little bit. He's at 3,800 on DraftKings. That's a really cheap price. Larry Nance is cheap, 3,200 there. Against the Lakers, I like playing a lot of guys.
Yeah, and then as other pieces, and we have to turn over the show in a minute to the live before lock with got Terry McBride, Matt LaMarca bringing us home for the last stretch, and actually they're going to be on for an hour and a half because they're going to be covering our sponsor Prize Picks for 30 minutes after the slate locks. But I don't think there's a whole lot to see in terms of role players on Portland. Is there anybody outside of Dame that's really catching your attention?
No, I think that I mean, like I said, you could get some Simons or Nance just because it helps get you some of those late games guys, and I don't mind playing against Lakers, but outside of that, I don't think so.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add with those guys too is if you do get some of them into your lineups, you could always pivot off them if we find out that Anthony Davis is out and some better value opens up. So it does offer a little bit more flexibility. Now, guys, that is going to do it for Steve and I. But do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because Live Before Lock is next.
like a plan. Good evening, Awesemo basketball fans. What's going on out there? It's good to see you this afternoon or this evening, whatever the case may be for you. Had some changes behind the scenes, so you got me hosting today, but fortunately, we've got my pal Matt LaMarca here to take us through all the ins and outs of what we think is probably going to be a pretty wild slate. They were talking about it on the previous show, the importance of being around your computer kind of all night long with a lot of the injury concerns we've got tonight. And I think Matt and I are both seeing this kind of the same way. We've gotten a couple pieces of news. We'll go through those. We'll take you guys through all the ins and the outs and, what we expect. We're brought to you by Prize Picks tonight, so make sure to check them out. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Make sure you guys hit the like and the subscribe down there as well. It really helps us out a ton. Last show, they had like 350, I think I saw just before. That's good for a deeper dive, but I think we can get it up over 500 pretty quickly here. So let's do that. Let's focus on getting all those likes. Matt, before we dive in, how you doing, buddy? How's your weekend going?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Busy. This is always the busy time of year for this industry, right? We got the NBA, NFL overlap. So really, just grinding. And I'm excited to sort of, this is like a little break, right? A little treat. We get to talk about basketball and build some lineups and hopefully have fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love this time of year too. You get those sports, and those are my main focuses. We were just talking about it a little bit before the show. I love the weekend is just all basketball, football these days, be it writing for the site. I have a couple columns up for football. I know you do a ton for football. We both do a lot for basketball. So it's just so much fun. But then I also think about like EMAC, I know is in the YouTube chat right now. And we say, oh yeah, we're loaded down with NBA and NFL both going on. He's also adding in, he doesn't miss a slate of anything. So I'm sure playing NHL today on top of that. I'm sure he's got some MMA going on. I'm sure he's got some NASCAR going tomorrow. So guys, we cover all that stuff at the site too, which is the beauty part. So you guys can check all that out. Get on the Awesemo Plus plan. We'll get into a promo code. It's NBA Live Before Lock, if you hadn't guessed that. All caps. We'll get to that in a little bit too. But Matt, let's dive into this slate a little bit. And you want to pick an injury, and we'll start there. We've got some of the news, but we've got a lot that we're still waiting on. We found out Donovan Mitchell is going to be playing, so that has an impact. We can definitely take the upgrades off of Clarkson and Ingles, I think, on that one. We think Kyle Lowry is likely to play. What's your biggest question mark right now, I guess? And then what are you kind of more sure of?
Man, it's really tough, right? This is a night where you need late swap. If you're not going to be around the computer, you might not want to get all that action in tonight. You might want to scale it back. The biggest injury, of course, is Anthony Davis out in LA. And of course, that's the latest game on the slate. If he's out, then Russell Westbrook becomes the ultimate late night hammer. His usage rate with Davis and LeBron off the court this season, 45.6%. So you certainly want to leave yourself some flexibility in the event that Davis gets ruled out. But I mean, every team has an injury that's going to play a part here. John Collins questionable for the Hawks. Kristaps is questionable for Dallas, and he looks pretty appealing on FanDuel, I might add, if he plays. Jaylen Brown, thankfully we know he's out, but Josh Richardson is questionable for the Celtics. And then you've got the whole situation in Philly, with the latest report being that Green and Korkmaz are true game time decisions. So if those two guys are ruled out, I don't know who's going to play for them.
Yeah, and they are really running short on wings and ball handlers over there in Philly. I saw just before we jumped on the air, they recalled two guys I've never heard of from a team I've never heard of to be on the bench for this game. So Jaden Springer and Aaron Henry from the Blue Coats are going to be on the bench for the Sixers. Hopefully, for the purposes of my lineups and the smoothness of this show, we don't get Korkmaz ruled out because I've got a ton of him. He was coming up pretty valuable on the FanDuel slate. You mentioned the Celtics as well. I've been getting to a ton of Al Horford through the day. I've been getting to a decent amount of Robert Williams. Just some uptick in opportunity. It's not like a direct Jalen's going to necessarily create more shots for them, but more opportunities to grab some rebounds without him on the court, more minutes potentially just as they change up the rotation a little bit. So I've been getting a lot of value out of both of those guys who have contributed value as well through the season. Within the injuries, who are the guys that are really floating to the top because of some of the injuries that we already know about? And I'm thinking about, the Boston team. I'm thinking about maybe a little bit about Phoenix in that equation. Yeah. So who are the ones that you're really looking at there?
Yeah, I think Schroeder is a great play at 5,400 on DraftKings. I mean, he's been averaging over a DraftKings points per minute anyway this season, and he seems pretty locked into 30 minutes or so with Brown out of the lineup. He is gonna command ownership, but I think that he is somebody I want to be overweight on still. The Phoenix center situation, you've got Kaminsky, you've got JaVale McGee. They're projected to be the two highest owned players on the slate right now on Phoenix. I don't know if I'd necessarily play them together. I might want to make it an either or type situation because, those two players are clearly going to be negatively correlated, but is there enough playing time for both of them to get there? There could be a scenario where that happens. So, sort of deciding between those two guys or if you should play both guys together is going to be a big point on this slate. And then it just comes down to how much Philly value are we getting? I think Shake Milton's going to be somebody who, we know is in the lineup and is going to be a viable option. Tyrese Maxey should get some good run. And then if we get Green and Korkmaz, they're both going to be viable too.
Yeah, and Korkmaz, we've had at the top of the board throughout the day. He's got a ridiculous optimal lineup rate for his 4,200 on FanDuel, 4,300 on DraftKings, where he's got multi-position eligibility. Comes up in the optimal lineup a ton for us, and with the question mark on him, not a lot of people are going to be getting there. So he's a massive leverage play as we've got him right now. That's why he's popping into so many of my lineups. That's the way I'd like to keep it, like I said, especially with guys like Shake, guys like Tyrese Maxey coming up more expensive on the FanDuel slate. It just makes it a difficult situation to pivot up to those guys if you need to in a bit of an emergency, and completely changes the shape of lineups. If you're getting to those guys, let's say we get the news, no Korkmaz here. Are you looking, are you expecting the massive minute share? I don't think it's going to be over 40 minutes for Maxey, but are you expecting him to trend up close to that 40-minute bubble, the 38-minute range? We've got him projected right now for like a 34-minute night with Korkmaz in. So I would expect that that's going to really bump him. I would expect Shake's going to get a little bit more. And then a guy that I don't think the field typically gets to enough is Seth Curry, just based on his shooting acumen. If he has a good night shooting the ball, he can rack up points in a hurry. Out of those three guys, which one's kind of your favorite in that situation?
I would say probably Shake. He's the cheapest of the group, and he's the best on a per minute basis, 1.04 DraftKings points per minute this season. So I think we can, if it kind of becomes a situation where they're all going to play, I'll just take the guy who's the best on a per minute basis. And Shake did get up to like 34 minutes in their last game. Maxey played almost 44 minutes in their last game. So there's a lot of minutes available right now. You can throw George Niang back into the mix. Like if Green and Korkmaz get ruled out, I would say that the entire team essentially is in play, with the possible exception of Andre Drummond, just because they haven't been willing to do the Drummond Embiid lineups together up till this point.
That's gonna be scary. Don't put that in the air, because when we get that night, if Drummond just picks up a few extra minutes, we know the damage he can do at 1.48 fantasy points per minute so far this season. Let's not worry about that. But yeah, I agree with that. There's going to be some interesting plays no matter which way Philly breaks. And just looking at Seth Curry, it's weird too. 76.1% true shooting for the season, but only 0.76 fantasy points per minute. Just shows how much he's scoring dependent at 5,400 on FanDuel, 6,200 on the DK slate. Just makes him harder to get to. But I do like getting there when the field isn't.
Have we gotten to the point where we can say, like, in an open gym, empty gym, right? Stand still shooting. Is he now a better shooter than his brother?
Oh man,
have we gotten to that
that's
point?
So tough. I mean, they're both just gold. How can you really call it? I mean, the numbers back it up though. It's not crazy. Let's put it that way. But just if I had one shot to save my life, I think I still want Steph taking it.
Yeah.
Just I got to go that route. But yeah, I mean, Seth is right there. And then you got their dad. I mean, it's what a family. Let's take a look around. We talked about some of the that was the other thing I wanted to ask you. You mentioned with JaVale McGee and Kaminsky, not necessarily wanting to get them together, although with the pricing, like you said, you can get to that night where at 3,700, 3,400 on the DraftKings slate, you can see a path to that potentially working out. 3,500, 4,100 on FanDuel, maybe a little bit less so, maybe it takes a little bit away. But I wanted to ask you on the Boston side of things, similar kind of a concept, getting Horford and Robert Williams in the same lineup. And I was getting that a little bit in my crunches on FanDuel, and I assume it's coming up as similarly on DraftKings because they're priced very similarly. Is that a spot that you're willing to get to both of those guys, considering we've got them both pegged around 30 minutes and pretty productive numbers on both guys?
Yeah, I feel like there's less negative correlation between those guys because they will share the court. McGee and Kaminsky, it's kind of like one is in and the other is out type of situation, right? If we look at the other game that Ayton has missed this season, Kaminsky played 28 and a half minutes and McGee played about 19 minutes. So roughly 48 total minutes, right? They're going to get the center job and that's about it. So it's more, you just have to decide which one of those two I think is going to be the guy on this slate. I do think that Kaminsky would be my pick, but if you use the boom bust tool, McGee is really popping as the preferred leverage option when you factor in ownership and stuff. So I would be much more inclined to play the two Boston guys together just because they'll play together.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that take. And with the flexibility, you get additional positional flexibility on FanDuel these days. So you can mix and match a lot of these center and power forward plays. And that's, for me, that's really how I've been using multi-position on FanDuel. It's a lot around the front court and then getting to the high-value guards, the high-price guards for me, at least through the first part of the season, the way they've priced things. And it's been similar on DK. We've been able to do that on DK for a lot longer, of course. But I think it does make sense to just kind of get through a rotation of some of those guys. You mentioned the choice between McGee and Kaminsky, and then with the Boston guys in play in that front court as well, and a few other, obviously, valuable front court spots. I think it just makes sense to start rotating through those. For me, I think I lean toward the McGee side slightly higher on the points per minute. I've got him 1.17 FanDuel points per minute, and we've got Kaminsky at 1.16. And we are getting some news in. It looks like Korkmaz is available, which is fantastic for my lineups. Won't have to make too many changes now while we talk. And Danny Green is out. So what does that do for you Philly-wise now that we just spent the last couple minutes talking through those Philly options and had a change with the Korkmaz news? Is that just kind of all shift all of that to Korkmaz for you?
Yeah, I mean, Korkmaz is a fire at 4,300 on DraftKings. I mean, he's excellent in terms of per minute production, 0.94 DraftKings points per minute. I'm going to have all of these guys sprinkled in and around my lineups here. I do think that Korkmaz will probably be my favorite. He's popping the most in the boom bust tool. I'll be interested to see what his ownership projection looks like as it sort of ticks up here closer to lineup lock. I would bet that he gets, significantly more popular the closer we get, but I still think Korkmaz is appealing. Milton is appealing. Niang is appealing. And Seth Curry will probably be the lowest owned out of that group just because of his price tag, but all four of those guys, sure, fire them up.
So nobody's coming off the board for you in Philly based on that news. It's just kind of maybe tempers expectations on some of the other guys and thrusts Korkmaz up toward the top of that board. And that's kind of similar the way, I mentioned I've already got a ton of Korkmaz, but I definitely do still want to get some shares of Shake in there. I want to get some shares of Seth Curry, like I mentioned in there. So that's what I'm going to be working on here in the background for a couple of minutes while we go through this. But let's actually, no, I was going to say let's get off of injuries, but injuries are just going to kind of dictate the way that we talk about this slate, I think. You mentioned wanting to save a lot of room in the latest game of the night for the news around Anthony Davis. Do you have a specific plan for how you're doing that as you build lineups, what you're doing in like Fantasy Cruncher, or just what you're doing when you build a lineup? Are you putting a specific guy in one spot and a specific guy in another spot with plans that, all right, if this news breaks a certain way, I can switch these two guys without adapting most of the lineup? Or is it just a spot that's just going to be wide open and we've got to recrunch it?
Yeah, it's tough to do because he's the third most expensive player on the slate, Davis, that is, on DraftKings, and he is the most expensive player on the slate on FanDuel. So, the obvious sort of pivot is on DraftKings, you just do Russell Westbrook, but you have to find the extra $400 to make that swap happen. So I think building in, a salary cap, make sure to keep $400 in any lineup that includes Davis, but maybe doesn't have Westbrook. I think that's an interesting way to ensure that you have the right flexibility there. On FanDuel, I think you kind of just have to recrunch and hope for the best.
Yeah, and that's where it's going to be a challenge, depending on what time we get that news with all the other power forward center eligibility that we've gotten, that we've talked about a little bit on the FanDuel slate here. It's going to be very interesting to see what the timing on that looks like. But yeah, with $1,000 difference between Westbrook and Anthony Davis, it's very, very difficult to make that Westbrook Davis play. So yeah, that one's concerning. The other guy I wanted to just round back around to was Porzingis. You mentioned his potential value on the FanDuel slate, only 7,000 at the power forward in the center spot, coming up in the optimal lineup 16.5% of the time with positive leverage for us. Bit of a different play at 7,500 on the DK slate, power forward only, and you just have a little bit of a difference in the counting stats over there. Is he somebody you're really looking to target, or is he just kind of a mix in? If he plays, you'll get to him where you get to him, or is he somebody that you'll kind of give a bump to and really look to get to on the FanDuel slate if we do get news on him?
I don't think he's going to be a core play, just because you always have to keep that injury, first game back with a player like him. It's going to be a factor, right? I would imagine Dallas keeps him pretty limited, but even if he plays, 26 minutes, something like that, I still think he can pay off this salary. And he's going to be pretty low owned. I wrote an article the other day and had Kristaps as the poster boy. It just so happened to be the game that he got hurt. And my mentions of people saying you can't play Kristaps in DFS, like people hate this guy. I'm telling you, they hate this guy. He had 46.5 FanDuel points the game before in less than 30 minutes. So we know this guy's ceiling. The coaching staff has talked all offseason about getting him more involved. He's going to be more of a focal point. And his skill set fits whatever site you're playing on, right? On FanDuel, you get the points for the defensive stuff, which he's very good at in terms of protecting the rim. And on DraftKings, you can get the 3-point bonus from him as well. So I think Porzingis, risky, right? But a player that I want to be overweight to the field on.
Yeah, and fortunately, with the ownership as we've got it now, with the question mark on his status, you can get over the field without too much fanfare on the FanDuel slate. So I think it's worth doing. You're definitely. I was a big Porzingis fan when he was on my Knicks, but certainly a guy who's a little bit made of glass, maybe a little bit of an attitude issue. But when he's on the court, when he's healthy, you can't question the production and the skills. Like you said, he can do everything out on the basketball court. So he is a player I like to get to when he's out there, particularly when he's under-owned. Talking about some other under-owned plays on the slate, just kind of taking a broad view of the slate. We'll take a look at the guards and the point guards and the shooting guards first. I'm sorting it by DraftKings, by FanDuel, so we might miss a few guys that have different position eligibility, but we'll try and catch everybody. As far as the different salary tiers, just in general at the guard spot, who are some of your favorite guard plays on either side?
I'm going back to the Damian Lillard and I'm good. I feel like I could just make a recording and continue to play it back because I'm going to play Damian Lillard until he pops, right?
Same.
Like he's just simply too good of a player not to break out of this shooting slump. The minutes are there. The usage has been there for the most part. He really backed off aggressiveness in his last game, but that'll happen when you start the game 2 for 13 from the field. So if you look at the data, he's still getting the same type of looks he was getting last year in terms of, they're open looks. They're looks that he has made in the past. So I'm all in on Lillard once again. And if he burns me, he burns me. But I think you have to be interested in him at 8,600 on FanDuel. It's just too good of a price tag.
Yeah, absolutely. I would smash that any day of the week. That's just one that you plug and play and don't really sweat just based on the player that we know that Damian Lillard is. Nothing happened to him. He did not forget how to play basketball in the offseason. The trade stuff like they were talking about on the last show was a little bit overblown. Much as I wanted him to come to my Knicks, he did not and probably never wanted to. So yeah, we just gotta ride out the slump and we're gonna get that production. And like you said, I want to be there the day that it happens, not the day after it happens. As far as the other pay up guys, guy I've been getting to a decent amount, wrote up a little bit about him in the afternoon, and it looks like it's holding up mostly despite being at a pretty high price. And another guy who's kind of in a slump, at least with his shooting, only 49.9% true shooting percentage on the season. One of the highest priced guys on both slates, Luka Doncic. Different positional eligibility, point guard, small forward for more money on DK, point guard, shooting guard for 10-2 on FanDuel. Are you getting to any Luka shares here?
Sure. Yeah, I have plenty of Luka. Again, if you look at all the rate stats, the usage rate, assist rate, rebound rate, it's all basically the same, as it was last year for him. He's just not making any shots. The price tag, again, has come down to a point where it's very reasonable for him. He's 10-2 on FanDuel, and you can play him at shooting guard, which is a nice plus. He's a player that I expect to bounce back at some point. And we did just get confirmation, by the way, that Kristaps is in. That affects my interest in Doncic 0, right? We've seen that Doncic doesn't get a huge usage bump with Porzingis in the lineup. So you can kind of treat them as independent plays, right? Like Doncic is just as good of a play with Porzingis or without Porzingis. I think like it's a negligible difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are guys that I'm always willing to consider kind of on their own individually or when they're both in there. Looks like the last news drop that came in our premium Discord in the NBA Breaking News channel from the News God. Jason Kidd said Porzingis will be in his normal rotations, but probably won't play more than 30 minutes. So it sounds like he's on a minimal kind of a restriction, but that's going to be right around where he's normally going to be. So I think fire away with Porzingis shares there. And guys, you can always get that news in our premium Discord. The News God does a killer job for all the different sports that we've got. And I have to clean up a little bit of business because I haven't been good with reading these plugs because I've been having so much fun talking about the slate, honestly, and there's so much to talk about. But let's see what we got here. NBA Live Before Lock promo code. All caps, all one word, NBA Live Before Lock. You get on the Awesemo Plus plan. You get access to that premium Discord that I was just talking about. On our Platinum plan, you get everything that we've got. You get every sport we cover, projections, ownership, tools like the boom bust, tools like top stacks for NFL, tools like top stacks for NHL. It gives you access to the entire site, the entire company. Come on into our Discord and say hi. If you use that promo code, you get 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. If you're here only for NBA, you only care about NBA, jump on the Awesemo Plus NBA weekly package, $16.95, or we've got the Express package, $4.95. That's our entry-level plan, gives you some nice letter grades, makes things very, very easy. Does not include our projections and our ownership projections, though. That's on the $16.95 standard Awesemo Plus plan. So hop on there, guys. If you're going for the Platinum, one more time, NBA Live Before Lock gets you 25% off your first week. Now let's jump over. We've got our awesome sponsor, Prize Picks, to talk about. First off, if you live in Maryland, heads up because they are now live in your state. They have daily prop-based contests. You don't have to worry about sharks. You don't have to worry about playing against guys like Alex, guys like Steve, guys like Matt, and guys like, well, you can play against me, guys, let's be honest. But guys like that, all these experts out there, you don't have to worry about mass entry. You don't have to worry about optimizers. We're making prop-based picks. They are a great site. You pop in 5-player lineups, you make 5 picks, gets you up to 10 times your entry fee if you get them all right. Use your knowledge of multiple sports. They have cross-sport entries, so you can play a couple picks from NHL with a couple picks from NBA, mix things up. You download their app on the App Store, on Google Play. You can play on prizepicks.com, and we've got a promo going there too. If you use promo code Awesemo, all caps, one word, because it's only one word, $100 bonus on your first deposit. So it's a match bonus on your first deposit up to $100. We have free player prop tools on the site. We're going to get into that. We're going to stick around for a half an hour after the show's over, and we're going to go through some Prize Picks picks based on our player props tool on the site to help you make the best picks. It's a killer combination, guys, with $100 free if you use the promo code Awesemo on your first match, on your first deposit. They'll match it. We'll get into the Awesemo Hall of Fame in a little bit. I don't know if we're going to read through the tweets. There's too much basketball to discuss. But if you hit a good result, top 3 in a contest with over 5,000 entries, guys, it wins you a free month of platinum. Tweet that out to Awesemo HOF, Awesemo Hall of Fame. We'll respond to you. We're going to retweet it. We're going to brag about your win there. Then get in touch with my support department at support@awesemo.com. We'll get you set up with your free month. All right. We're not going to go through all the winners. Congratulations to all of them, but we just don't have time. Matt, let's jump back on the conversation about this slate here. Any other guards that we should be calling out here? You know, we talked about a lot of the value plays, but I was getting earlier in the day to a bunch of shares of CJ McCollum, also to go with the the Dame play from out in Portland. I was getting to some shares of DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine from Chicago. I was actually getting a bunch of lineups that were coming up with a lot of Chicago players, which I had to go in and limit. I was getting too much of them, and I think they cannibalize one another still a little bit. But as far as the wings out there, the guards out there, are you getting any of those guys? You getting any of the Miami guys? Where are you looking for other guard plays?
Yeah. So first on the McCollum thing, I think that again is another situation where you kind of want to pick either or. McCollum is having the best season of his career, and it's not a coincidence that Lillard is having one of the worst, right? They're historically negatively correlated. There's only one ball. Only one of those guys can score at a time. So again, I'm kind of sticking with my guns as far as Lillard goes, but if you want to build in some, McCollum like leverage lineups, I think that's totally fine too. I would just refrain from playing them both together. As far as the Bulls, Lonzo's always a guy that seems to be popping for me. I think he's pretty fairly priced at the moment. And then Zach LaVine at 79 on DraftKings, that seems like way too low of a price tag for him.
Yeah, solid price, 79, 86 across town. So it's a very different play on LaVine, but talking about a guy with 1.10 fantasy points per minute, 60% true shooting percentage, 22.2% on assist rate this season. So definitely a guy that I like to mix in. I was getting to a good amount of DeRozan as well with his small forward eligibility on the FanDuel slate. Are those guys that you would consider playing together, LaVine and DeRozan?
Yeah, I think you can play them together. I mean, DeRozan has been doing some good stuff as far as the peripheral stats, right? He's had 6 rebounds or more in 3 straight games. And then the usage has been there, right? Like I'm honestly shocked at how involved he's been for Chicago to start the year. So I think that he's underpriced. I think LaVine is underpriced. And I think that you can play those two guys together. They have a positive correlation. Obviously it's a small sample size, but things look like it's okay for them to start their tenure here in Chicago.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of players. I'm very curious to see how their season goes and how their production goes as things carry out. It's easy to say early on. It's, we're seeing some nice indicators, especially from a guy like DeMar DeRozan. We'll see how it all settles in. But yeah, right now I'm with you. And if it sounds like I'm just kind of stalling for time, it's because I am, because we just got an update into the Boom Bust tool, and I'm dropping that in here. So let's see what else we've got to talk about, see what's changed on here as we go. So it looks like optimal lineups wise, we do get a little boost to Shake Milton now. It comes up, Furk and Korkmaz still near the top there, but with Danny Green coming off, it looks like Shake got a little bit of a bump in the optimal lineup rate. Still going to be very highly owned, negatively leveraged across both sites. Taking a look through some of the other guards here. Anybody else that you really want to bring up before we move on to some of the forward spots?
I think that's a good mix here. I did just get a notification that Josh Richardson is going to play. So that might be a little bit of a negative for a guy like Dennis Schroeder, but Schroeder's still somebody that I'll have plenty of exposure to, but I might tone it back a smidge there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Schroeder was not coming up that much for me, but I was kind of buying into what everybody was saying about him if we were getting no Josh Richardson. But yeah, for me, I think that'll take him a little bit further off the board. I'll happily take a couple shares if I get him, but he's not going to be a core focus for me now. So, all right, let's change gears. Let's move over to the forward spots. And again, it's a situation where we've got a lot of different positional eligibility. So we'll talk about it as best we can from site to site. But just looking at some of the optimal rates, we get some big time differences in where these values are across the different sites. But we do have a couple common plays, like Frank Kaminsky being one of the top plays on both sites, despite some negative leverage in terms of our optimal rate. Outside of the guys we've already talked about, outside of the Phoenix guys, the Boston guys, and maybe Anthony Davis, where are we looking to go with forward? And we'll throw center into the mix as well, but for some of those multi-position guys. But in general, forward, small forward, power forward, where are you looking to go outside of some of the guys that we've already talked about?
I think it's an interesting Jimmy Butler spot, right? Jimmy Butler has been pretty fantastic to start the year, coming off of a bad game in his last outing against Boston, but the whole team had a bad game in that one, right? I think we can throw that out. Prior to that, at least 47 DraftKings points in 5 straight games. He's got a tough matchup tonight versus the Jazz, But I do think if you're looking for a low-owned stud with some upside, like I think Butler could fit that description. I would rather go with him at 9,500 on DraftKings than say Jason Tatum at 9,600 on DraftKings.
And what's driving that on the Tatum side of things? Because Tatum was coming up a little bit for me, but it wasn't as much as I was expecting, given the idea that Jalen wouldn't be out there with him today. So I was surprised by that when I first ran my early crunches. But I think it was partly price, and then partly, at least on the FanDuel side of things, just a lot more getting squeezed out of the power forward spot by a lot of the value plays, and a little bit of out of the small forward spot as well for me. Was there anything specific about Tatum that was knocking him down, or was it just how that kind of similar situation, how the values and stuff broke?
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's always going to be sort of a negative when you look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, because Butler is just capable of scoring points in so many more ways, right? With Tatum, if he's going to hit his ceiling, he needs to score 30 plus points. You know, can he get rebounds? Yeah, but that's about it, right? He's going to get you those two categories. Jimmy Butler can do everything on a basketball court. So that's reflected in the fantasy points per minute. Butler's at 1.32, Tatum's at 1.1. Even if Tatum does see a slight bump with Jalen out of the lineup, I still think he's overpriced at 9,600. So for me, it's kind of like in that range. I would much rather go with the Butlers and DeRozans of the world. I'm getting up to, Anthony Davis quite a bit. And then, certainly there are value plays that we're considering too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great tiebreaker, when you're looking at a couple of guys who are at least similarly priced, like Butler and Tatum are today, play similar positions. Getting to those guys who do a little bit more on the court, don't have to rely on scoring, can rack up a few counting stats here and there, definitely adds value, and it is definitely a good way to break those ties if you guys are out there struggling with it. Looking around the board, another guy that we didn't really touch on too much, but is in play in that Phoenix team as well, is Michael Bridges, coming up a decent price, 5,100 on the FanDuel slate, 54 over on the DK slate. Small forward, power forward on FanDuel, shooting guard, small forward on DK. So you get him across 5 position eligibility on the DK slate. He's coming up reasonably optimal over on DK, is 11.9%, but negatively leveraged. He's more interesting to me on FanDuel, coming up nearly 20% optimal, but we're getting to him a lot. The field is really on him at that low price, negative 13 leverage. Is he a play for you, or is that just too much public weight?
Yeah, he's a fade for me, or maybe not a full fade, but he's somebody that I'm going to be well below the field on. Again, he's just not somebody that does enough for me on the court, right? He's a pure scorer. So for him to bury us, he's going to have a red hot shooting night. And he's had some of those recently, by the way. He was 9 for 15 2 nights ago, played over 41 minutes. He had less than 25 fantasy points. He was 7 for 11 in his last game, over 30 minutes. He had less than 23 fantasy points. So he's going to need increased volume and a hot shooting night to really hurt us at this price tag. I think he's more of like a cash game type of play than a tournament play. I just don't see a lot of upside with him.
Yeah, I like that call. And just to bear out exactly what you were just saying, last season, 0.82 FanDuel points per minute on 17.8% usage. This season, 17.3% usage, 32.9 minutes a night. His true shooting percentage is 65.9%. And he's only at 0.77 FanDuel points per minute. That's absurd. He should be well higher than that. And that's what happened is 5.5% assist rate, 5.3% rebounding rate. There's just not much else there. So yeah, it's a tough play for me. I'll have some of them, but I'm definitely going to be undercutting that field. When a player like that gets into that heavy negative leverage, it's definitely a spot I like to start undercutting. A guy that I think is certainly a much more capable play, and a guy that I don't sweat the negative leverage nearly as much, and I think is a pretty reasonable price at 8,600 on FanDuel and 8,200 on DK, is Bam Adebayo. We talked about Jimmy Butler having some value in that Miami rotation. What are you thinking about Bam on this one?
Yeah, I'm always going to have interest in Bam, especially on FanDuel where you can play him at power forward. I think that power forward eligibility is just super appealing, right? Because power forward is not a position where there are a ton of guys who pop on a nightly basis, right? Center is usually one of the strongest positions. So by playing Bam at power forward, we're essentially giving ourselves the opportunity to play 2 stud centers in the same lineup. Bam can do everything on the court, right? The fact that Lowry is back, I don't know if he'll necessarily have the same type of usage that we've seen from him to start the year, right? He's been over 30 in a couple of games, but I think he's more of like a 25% type of usage guy. But that's okay with Bam because he's going to get the rebounds. He's going to hand out, 4 or 5 assists. He'll get the blocks. So I think he's fine at 8,600. I don't think he's like a screaming value or anything like that, but he's a player that I have plenty of.
Yeah, and he's a guy that if you were tracking anybody who was using the projections from the site, the data from the site through most of the day, I believe we had Kyle Lowry in through most of the day. So it's not a situation where I think you need to change or downgrade where you had Bam earlier in the day. I think he's the same play. It just would have been a situation where if Lowry came off, maybe he would have seen a little bit of an uptick in his assist rate. Maybe he would have been a little bit better of a play. So I'll take what I get of him. He's not somebody I'm going out of my way for in this situation, but definitely somebody, like you said, I'm always happy to have on a roster. And yeah, that's one of the guys that, jumps immediately to mind when I talk about the guys that I've rostered the most in those power forward rotations that you would normally be restricted to center. So anybody else that we haven't touched on yet that you're really getting to a ton of at either of the forward spots?
Yeah, Big Al certainly deserves another shout out. We kind of talked about him at the beginning, but just an absurd revival with the Celtics, right? He kind of spent last year down in their retirement home in Oklahoma City. He was resting up, rehabbing for when he could get back to playing some important minutes. And he's at 1.36 FanDuel points per minute to start the year. That trails only Anthony Davis at the position right now. Better than Tatum, better than Bam, better than Porzingis. He's good. He's playing really well. So I'm going to continue to take the discount on him while I can. And a player that's interesting to me on FanDuel, on DraftKings, somebody that I think is a strong play at 4,800 is Norm Powell, but he is somebody that the boom bust tool really kind of dislikes at the moment, just because he's projected for a pretty healthy bit of ownership. But I don't care. I think 4,800 for him is just too cheap. He has had 37.5 DraftKings points now in back-to-back games. He's kind of picking up some of that scoring slack that we've seen Lillard leave on the table. He's not as negatively leveraged as Lillard and McCollum. In fact, him and McCollum are actually pretty positively leveraged. So if you're kind of playing the fade Lillard route, I think loading up on him and McCollum, Powell and McCollum in the same lineup makes a lot of sense. And even in my McCollum or my, sorry, too many names. Even in my Lillard lineups, I have plenty of Powell as well.
I like that. Dramatically different play from site to site. So he wasn't somebody that was really on my radar, primarily building on FanDuel. He is somebody I actually clicked on earlier in the day when I was just hand building my placeholder because I just happened to have exactly 6,100, I think, at the small forward spot. But then to your point, I kind of looked at the boom bust. I saw how infrequently he was coming up optimal, how low his boom score was, and I took him out. I went a different direction. But yeah, 4,800 on DK compared to 61 on FanDuel, that's a totally different play. So I'd be happy to get to him, even with some negative leverage over there. I don't mind it on a guy like that who I trust to, give me the handful of points that we've got him projected for with upside to more if he has a decent shooting night. 66.6% true shooting on the season, 0.95 FanDuel points per minute. So 0.96 on the DK side of things. So definitely a player I'd like to get to over there. Looks like we can take a leap over to the center spot then, and we'll jump in, guys, and get some questions as well as we talk through center and any breaking injuries. So let me just sort this. I think I hit all the major reads. We're brought to you by Prize Picks again, guys. Check them out. If you get a good win out there, tweet the Awesemo Hall of Fame. Make sure you sign up with us at the site, even if it's on an inexpensive package. Jump into the Discord, say hi, get your questions answered. Participate in the community, become part of the team. I really encourage it. Stop guessing, start winning, guys. It's the way to go. So looking at the center spot, we talked about the Phoenix guys, but I think they bear at least a mention on both sites just for how popular they'll be and how frequently optimal they'll be. And that's JaVale McGee and Frank Kaminsky. We kind of touched on, maybe not playing them together, but getting to one or the other value in a lot of lineups is going to be a priority for me as I'm building this last set of lineups here. Still holding up the same way for you, Kaminsky favorite over McGee if you're gun to your head making the decision between the two?
Yeah, the workload is safer, right? I think we can pretty comfortably pencil Kaminsky in for, 25 plus minutes, and he's not that much worse on a per minute basis. So I think Kaminsky is the guy for me, but my goal is to be overweight on both players just to not have them in the same lineups. That's kind of my goal with these Phoenix guys.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a strong approach. And yeah, not being able to look into that crystal ball and know for sure which direction it's gonna go. I think we're just kind of bound. We're obliged to our own success to roster both of these guys and just hope we get it right in the right lineup. We touched on Horford just a minute ago, but definitely awesome play at the top of the board for me on both sites. We touched on AD quite a bit at the top, of eligible at power forward and center on both sites. One of the most expensive players on both sites. I think it makes sense to kind of move past those guys for the moment. Talk about some of these other guys. So anybody else on the board really popping for you? A guy I was getting on FanDuel at 6,400 a little bit earlier in the day was Clint Capella. I think he's still coming up in some of my lineups. He's not as positively leveraged as he was, but I like the optimal rate and I like the boom score probability at 6,400. A little bit less on DK at 71, but I think he's still playable over there. Is he somebody that was coming up at all for you?
Yeah, I definitely have plenty of Capella, but I got to say, we've talked about every possible member of the Philadelphia 76ers. We haven't mentioned Joel Embiid, right?
Oh, never heard of him.
And maybe Embiid is too hurt to function right now. You know, he's coming off of 35 DraftKings points in his last game. The usage is down. The rebound rate is down. Like, there's a lot of red flags with Embiid. So if you want to cross him off your board tonight, I completely get it. But we're talking about a guy who is 9,300 on FanDuel. That's about as cheap as you will ever see Joel Embiid. He is playing without his two best teammates, and he's going to fly completely under the radar. Like, I just have to be in on him at in that situation, right? I mean, he came into this season averaging over 2 fantasy points per minute with Simmons and Harris off the court. That number has come down pretty significantly since the start of this year, but he's still averaging over 1.8 FanDuel points per minute, right? Even if we think he only plays 30 minutes, he's shown that this season that he can get us, upper 50s fantasy points in 30 or so minutes. So I'm going to have Embiid, just throwing it out there. I get it if you're an idiot. I hate the play. Embiid is hurt, but I feel like I'm morally obligated to do it at this price tag and this set of circumstances.
I totally agree with that take in terms of getting to a superstar when he's priced down like that. And yeah, if people are out there, you're sweating the struggles, you're saying, geez, I don't know, he's been lousy this year, he might be hurt, but that's why he's priced at 9,300. That's why you're getting that discount. So it's paying you for that injury. It's paying you for that lack of production this season. So yeah, I think it makes all the sense in the world to at least grab some shares. It's not like he's going to be super popular, so it's easy enough to do. It doesn't necessarily jibe with what we're seeing in the boom bust, but I think it's just one of those spots where we can justify it based on who he is, based on just getting to a superstar when he's cheaper than he should be. So I think that's definitely a viable play. Looking around the board for some of the guys in like the mid-range, the price down a little bit from where Embiid's at. We talked about Bam. Nikola Vucevic, we talked about the Bulls a little bit, 8,100 in the middle for them. He wasn't really coming up for me. He's negatively leveraged across both sites. Not the greatest rates in terms of our metrics in the world, but definitely not at the bottom of the board either. And then a similarly priced guy at 8,400 on the FanDuel slate, 8,700 on the DK slate. Both guys center-only plays as well, which makes it interesting across both sites, is Rudy Gobert. Between the two, do you have a favorite, and are you getting to either one in terms of your lineup builds?
I think that it's a pretty bad spot for both, if we're being completely honest. I have virtually no interest in Vucevic against Embiid. It's just a spot where too many things can go wrong, right? He can struggle offensively. He can get into foul trouble. There's a lot of ways that Vucevic busts in this matchup, which he did the last time he faced the 76ers. He had 24 points in their last game. So I'm kind of scratching him off. I would rather go with Gobert, who has just been an absolute monster on the glass so far this season. Again, Miami is not a matchup that I'm thrilled to target, but I do think that there's more like positive outcomes for him than a guy like Vucevic in this spot.
Yeah, I think that's the way I would go as well. And it's also just for me, there is a little bit still of that lingering notion of just, only one ball, only one hoop. There's only so many ways that the things can go around in Chicago there. And with other players that I kind of was getting to from that offense, it's not a situation where I want to have Levine, DeRozan, and then Krim and Vooch into my lineup. So it's just, he'd be the guy that I cut there. Anybody else that we haven't really touched on at the center spot? If not, we can jump over and maybe grab a few questions here in the last 10 minutes before lock.
Yeah, it's not a spot that feels like a great source of value tonight, right? I mean, you have the Phoenix guys, but outside of those two players, I'm not sure who you're targeting that's going to be in that, sub 6K type of range. If you wanted to throw Robert Williams in there at 5,700 on FanDuel, I would be okay with that. But I think that for the most part, you're going to want either a Phoenix guy, you're going to want Capella, you're going to want Embiid. Some of these other, power forward center eligible players that we've mentioned who are all kind of at the top of the pricing spectrum. I think that's the way you approach the position tonight. I don't think that it's a spot to get super creative.
Yeah, and the boom bust tool is really, really jiving with that notion, right? You get JaVale McGee and Frank Kaminsky up at the top of the board, 4,100, 3,700 across sites for McGee, 35, 34 across sites for Kaminsky. And then you look down the next 10 guys on the board, and if we're sorting by optimal lineup rate on the DK slate, the next 10 guys are an average of, I should probably do that with the DK salaries if I'm going to say that, an average of 7,850 in terms of salary. So that is a major, major jump from an average of 3,500 across the top two guys. So you're right. It's just jumping immediately from only two value guys on the board, at least into the mid range where you can get to Robert Williams at 57 and then everybody else above 6. So yeah, it's definitely a spendier kind of a night than we've seen recently in the center spot. And then we can get to some of the wings and mix and match a lot. Let's jump over to chat here. Foster Elijah sent us a super chat, $1.99. We appreciate that. Just a nice straightforward question. FanDuel core plays, must plays for the night. So who are your core guys on FanDuel?
Core guys for me on FanDuel are going to be Al Horford, Kaminsky, and Anthony Davis. That's sort of my core trio right there.
I like that. And then if we get any AD news, what's your plan to get off of those AD shares if you're building them in?
Yeah, you gotta leave yourself, a late option at point guard. So if you can get a Lillard in there, or throw in somebody from Portland, in the point guard spot, even if it's just a cheaper play, I guess. But you need to have the ability to get to Westbrook. That's really your only real pivot option. And then you can throw, like a Larry Nance in the power forward spot or somebody like that.
Makes sense.
Robert
Makes sense.
Covington,
And yeah, and it's just, it's an important consideration with everything that we've talked about with his injury and the fact that that game just goes off last and there isn't going to be another place to dump all that money into. So that's the reason to, keep considering that as you're building lineups out there in these last few minutes, guys. Just taking a look around the board to jump back into that question. I would also, I'm not sure if you mentioned Korkmaz, but he's a core play on FanDuel for me as well with the value over there. Looking around, Norm Powell is too cheap on DraftKings. Somebody said, yeah, we agree with that for sure. And we highlighted the price difference between sites for Norm Powell. Embiid or Tatum? I think you answered that one pretty definitively, but why don't you give us an Embiid or Tatum? No site give and take.
Yeah, it's going to be Embiid for me, and then it would even be Jimmy Butler over Tatum as well.
I like that dynamite little tack on there. I keep seeing people say Dame and Westbrook don't like each other. So what if they get mad and fight and get ejected in the first? Yeah, that's not something we want to plan for, guys. So
I haven't built that
things.
I haven't built a projected fight percentage slider into my model yet, but maybe if that happens, I'll have to consider it.
Yeah, that'll be something for a future version of my model here as well. But it does bring up the point of, guys, we see that a lot where people just out of nowhere, somebody will say, I'm going to fade this guy. And this guy happens to be the best or second best play of the night, or maybe is the best play up option of the night and not the best value play. But guys that shouldn't be just making a decision just apropos of nothing, right? We see that constantly, just people saying, I've decided I'm not going to play this guy tonight, or I've come up with this totally illogical, totally not numbers-based reason why I don't like this guy tonight. Somebody earlier in the day said, I'm going back to Carmelo Anthony tonight because he's my favorite. Well, all right, that's great, but you're probably locking in a lot of losing lineups or a lot of min cashes when you make moves like that. So you really want to focus on the numbers, guys, particularly if you're an Awesemo Plus subscriber and you've got access to all these great tools like the Boom Bust, like the Top Stacks. Follow the numbers. It's what you're paying for one, but it's the right way to build these lineups rather than just making decisions in a total vacuum of information. You want to use the tools. You want to follow the numbers, and especially in basketball, a sport that very, very much follows rates and very much builds in how it is, how it looks in going into lock and follows a pretty consistent path. It's really what you want to go. So I'm jumping over to the premium Discord because we've got that going as well. Somebody said, let's see. All right, DKGPP, Luka and Powell or Dame and Schroeder?
Luka and Powell.
Yeah, I agree with that, particularly since we got the Richardson news in Boston. I think that just takes Schroeder down too big of a peg. Ravash was asking, Opto likes Horford with Williams, McGee with Kaminsky, and Dame with CJ. Can you talk about how you guys feel about combining guys we normally wouldn't? So we did touch on that, but for people who missed that earlier in the show in the last couple of minutes here, Horford and Williams, McGee and Kaminsky, Dame and CJ. Can you talk about each of those pairings as far as playing them all together, or not all together, but playing each pairing, those guys together? I think you get it.
Sure. So here's how I would approach it. Celtics guys, fine to play together. They share the court together. I mean, they do a lot of similar stuff, but I think that both guys can succeed at the same time. We don't have a huge sample size as far as correlation goes. So far, yeah, there's really nothing to even comment on as far as the Boston guys, but I have no concerns about playing them together. The Phoenix guys, I'm a little bit more concerned, because they play the same position, right? They essentially are never going to share the court. They're only going to play the center spot for Phoenix. So if one guy does well, it increases the chances that the other guy is going to do poorly. Now, that being said, I fully acknowledge that both guys are cheap enough that they could both succeed tonight. So if you were dead set on playing both of them together, I think that's fine. I just wouldn't expect, both guys to hit massive ceiling games. That just doesn't seem like a realistic outcome to me. The last one is the Blazers guys. And for me, that's a hard and fast rule. I do not play Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum in the same lineup. They're both scorers. They need the rock to make things happen. If it's a game where the Blazers go to double overtime and both guys hit their ceiling, so be it. I lose on that night. Most other nights, you're not going to see the explosion game from both players. So I like to build a rule into Cruncher and just say, if, Lillard is in, no McCollum, vice versa, and we roll from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to use the powerful rules and groups features in Fantasy Cruncher. Another question that came up in Premium Discord. It's an interesting one from Jets World. If AD is out, do Howard or Jordan compare at all with McGee and Frank Kaminsky on DK for you or on FanDuel? Let's talk about both sides.
Good question. Howard he's somebody that I gave a cursory look to, right? But I just don't know how many minutes he would play, even with Davis out of the lineup. DeAndre Jordan has been the guy that's been playing more minutes, but I think Howard's the better player. So it's kind of a situation where the guy that I want to play of the two is not the guy who I think would get the biggest bump, if that makes sense. So I think the Phoenix guys are both just in much better spots. Like if you're just talking fantasy points per minute averages, they're clearly the top two out of that group of four. So I would stick with the Phoenix guys. If you wanted to leverage with some Dwight, I think that would be okay. But I do think that you might be giving up a few too many points, even from a leverage perspective. Like it just might not make sense.
All right, I'm with you on that one. And yeah, those were guys that weren't really popping up for me. And I'm just really hopeful that AD plays on this one and we don't have to sweat it because he's in a lot of my lineups and I don't want to. I
feel pretty good about it. Like,
yeah.
And again, this is pure hearsay. I have zero sources. Okay, don't say, "Oh, Matt LaMarca told me Anthony Davis was going to play," but I think that Davis, like, he knows the reputation about him, right? He knows that he kind of has gotten this, I'm soft reputation. And I think he tries to play hurt now to overcome that. We saw him basically try to play on like a broken leg in the playoffs last year, and he made it through 3 minutes before the team was like, yeah, you're actively hurting us by trying to be out here. So I think Davis plays.
You heard it here first, gang. Matt LaMarca says you can safely go to dinner. AD is definitely going to play later on, and don't worry about late swapping. You heard it. Guys, that brings us up to locks. So hopefully you got your lineups in. It's excellent. And do not take that last little bit there seriously. That was obviously a joke, but I guess I should say those things. So we're going to stick around for another half hour. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, and we are going to go through some stuff for Prize Picks. But before we do that, guys, let me just mention, hit the like button down there, hit the subscribe. Jump over to our other channels as well. We've got our fantasy football channel up now. We've got our betting channel. So they're totally different channels than the DFS one here. We're spreading our wings here at Awesemo, getting into a lot of different things, creating basically a 24/7 service for you guys here where something's going to be on all the time. You're going to get your gambling fix all the time. So make sure you like and subscribe on those ones as well. We are we're closing in on those 500 likes that we asked for. So hopefully in this last half hour, everybody will get us nudged up over that mark. But I'm going to pull up the Prize Picks slate here, and we'll take a look at some of that. And we'll go through the actual picks on Prize Picks while I get signed in. Let me do that. And we're also going to bring up, I mentioned before on the site, we have a specific board for NBA player props, which is super handy in building these out because it just gives you exactly what you need to figure out where the best player props are going to be. It gives you the win rate on what on our expectation. I should not talk about this and try and open it at the same time. Clearly, it gives you the expected win percentage compared to what the line is, and then it gives you an expected ROI. So if you're actually making the bet, so much the better. You get that ROI information. But all you have to do, you get Alex's projection right next to what the line is. So if you're making picks for Prize Picks, open this tool up. Make sure that it's the same line. Look at what Alex has it projected for. Look at what the win expectancy is, and then start booking your picks. And like we said before, if you get 5 of these right, you can get 10x your entry. Pretty solid. Nice little return on your money here.
I love this thing.
Yeah, the combination is great. Absolutely. So let's jump over there. Do you have any? Do you have Prize Picks open, Matt?
I do.
Awesome.
And just to start, we've got the Chris Paul under is just screaming out with the player prop tool. Alex has that as a 74% expected win. That's the highest of the slate from a scoring perspective. Easily the top ROI. I think that's a great starting block here. Is just lock that one in, and then we can start to really dig into some of these other ones.
Yeah, that seems like a great starting point. That was the one that I had my eye on up at the top of the board as well. It's pretty easy to pick at least one off the top of the board, guys, when you're making your Prize Picks picks here. And we do have separate tabs for each of the different categories, right? So we've got points, rebounds, and assists out here. So you can go from one to the next and sort by that expected win rate. And that kind of makes up at least the bulk of what your core on these Prize Picks boards can be. So just jumping over to the rebounding one, I'm looking at the over for Frank Kaminsky on 4.5 rebounds. 6.06 is where Alex has him projected. Now let me jump over to Prize Picks because I was doing it a little bit backward there by looking at our site first. And it looks like Kaminsky doesn't have a Prize Picks one, unfortunately. So you do run into that at times. So it probably makes sense for me to look at the Prize Picks board first here as we're doing this.
You could go with McGee if you're looking for one of the Phoenix guys. We have the JaVale over graded out pretty positively as well, and he is listed on Prize Picks. The over at 7.5 for Mr. Shackton a fool himself. I like that. We know that when McGee is on the floor, he's going to be active, right? The guy hunts rebounds, he hunts dunks. Like I'm a big fan of him when we know we're going to get minutes. So Chris Paul was the under.
Chris Paul was the under.
Right. Chris Paul under, JaVale McGee over.
Yep, and that was Mike doing an awesome job chiming in from behind the scenes there, asking us on that one, guys. But killer job on production, and did an awesome job also handling a lot of last minute changes before these shows started up behind the scenes. So just great job by him. But yeah, for the McGee thing too, just I was pulling up his per game numbers so far this season. 15.4 minutes per game. He's averaging 6.3 rebounds in that 15.4 minutes. So if we conservatively say he's going to get 22 minutes tonight, he should blow through that. So I like that one a lot. That's a pretty good number there. Let's see, jump back over to the Prize Picks board here, and I'll pull up, let me pull up the assists. That makes sense. Looking at a team that we talked about a little bit in terms of having a bunch of different guys doing some interesting things and the way that their chemistry is coming together. Since we're talking about assists, a chemistry play, a pure point guard, Lonzo Ball, 4.5 assists. What do you think of that one, Matt?
That seems pretty reasonable for him. I mean, Lonzo is one of the better passers in basketball. Now, he does have to share the rock with DeRozan and with Zach LaVine. So his assist numbers haven't been quite as impressive this year as they have been in some previous years. But he's had, let's see, he's coming off 5 in his last game. I don't know. I feel like that line is pretty close. I might be interested in the Westbrook under. Westbrook under at 10. I think that the narrative when we get no LeBron is that Westbrook is going to be hunting for his own shot a little bit more. I think he's going to play less the facilitator role and more the scorer role tonight. And if you notice, in his last game, he only had 5 assists. The Lakers offense in general is just not quite as good without LeBron. They're averaging less than 105 points per 100 possessions. So I kind of like the narrative of we'll go under on Westbrook's assist and look for him to maybe do more work as a scorer tonight.
All right, I like that. That's a good call. And just looking at his numbers for the season, averaging 8.1. So he's not averaging those triple-double numbers. So a little bit underneath that. And I think it's reasonable to say that pretty much any offense on the planet is worse off without LeBron James in it. So definitely a good reason to ding him there. And then looking back at the Lonzo one, I think you nailed the analysis there. 4.5 was the line. We've got that as going under 55% of the time. So that is like right on the even money, right on the coin flip. We like it nudging into the under a little bit, but it's not a high ROI bet, only 55% likely to hit on the underside of it. So those are ones that I just don't think we need to go to in terms of making Prize Picks picks. I think it just makes sense to stick with these expected win rate numbers here. And that Westbrook under one was the second highest one on the board at 76%. So you can see there's an obvious gigantic difference between those two picks. And that's what our props tool does. So you put this next to Prize Picks when you're making your selections on Prize Picks, guys, and it's just powerful, and it's something that not everybody out there has. A lot of people are just picking these blindly, I assure you. So let's see. Let's look around for some other ones. Tyrese Maxey, 15.5 points. That game starts up in 22 minutes. What do you think of Tyrese Maxey at 15.5 points? That seems just high. It sounds high to me, but I haven't looked at it on our board. Let me see.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I want to look at these 76ers guys, right? Like they stand out as a team that should be able to give us some scoring value. You know, a lot of times that's sort of how I'll proceed in the prop market. You know, this player is out, this player's rate stats go up X and X amount. So that said, I don't think I'm interested in Maxey for 15.5. I'd probably go with the over on Curry at 16.5 if I was going to play one of those. That said, the prop tool kind of likes the under on Maxey. They have that as, oh no, I'm looking at the assist prop for Maxey.
Yeah, it's the same story on the points. It likes the under. It's actually got a 65% win rate on the under. So that's one that I would be targeting taking in the under there. It's one of the better under props, it turns out. So I was happy to see that when I sorted over there. And yeah, I agree. I think taking the Curry one, let me see where that one comes in on our probabilities. We've got that a little bit more as a coin flip. It's 53% probable to hit the under. But I think if we're thinking in terms of some of the narrative and then just in terms of a hot shooting night from Seth Curry, he gets to 15.5 points with just a couple of threes. It's not that big a proposition for him to get there on a decent shooting night. So it's one of the coin flips that I would be, maybe a bit more interested in. But if we're going purely by by Alex's numbers, by the expected win rates, which is the right way to do this, that's one I would probably not go with on Prize Picks. What do you think about a assist on a 5.5 assist line on Mike Conley?
Yeah. I haven't given much thought to Utah at all today. It was kind of more just if Mitchell's out, then we can start to really think about how we want to attack Utah. But at full strength against the Heat, they're not a team that I would figure to do very well. So that would point me towards the under for Mike Conley potentially, as far as if I was going to attack this prop.
All right. And let's see, just going to jump over to, they've also got some interesting ones. They've got 3-pointers made. They've got free throws made. So those are ones we're not necessarily tabbing out at the site. But if you go into our projected stats tab, I think you can find what you're looking for in there. So I'm just poking around here, and I'll see if I can find an interesting one. All right, here's a guy that you mentioned can make a few threes for you every now and again. Kristaps Porzingis. We know he's in. His line is 1.5 3-pointers made. What do you think of that?
That seems high to me. If he was playing a normal complement of minutes, I would say that that's about right. He's at 1.3 made 3-pointers per game this season, in 26 minutes per game. If I knew we were going to get to that 30 mark, I would say that this is fair. But with the way things kind of stand, I would lean under with that one. I think if I was going to take a 3-point prop, I gotta just go to my guy Dame. I gotta go to Damian Lillard, and I'm taking the over on 3.5 made 3-pointers. Is it a bad bet? Maybe, probably, but he has averaged over 10 3-point attempts per game each of the past 2 years. He's 9.2 3-point attempts per game this season. So we really only need him to shoot 35 to 40% in the game to hit the over on that number. He's done that for basically his whole career. He's 21.7% from three this year, but he's a 37.3% career 3-point shooter. I am just buying the positive regression for Damian Lillard. I'm buying it in DFS, and I'm buying it here on Prize Picks. Give me the over.
I love it. That's a great call. And look, I mean, that's a solid way to make a bet like that too, or make a decision like that for Prize Picks selections too, or even for, other DFS sites. Anytime you can get a star player like that, who really the only proposition you need here is for him to come out and be who he is, that's a pretty solid wager to make. You're not asking for him to crack through with a multiple standard deviation game on what he normally does or anything like that. You're just asking him to go out and have a Damian Lillard kind of a game. So I think that makes a ton of sense. Definitely one to get to. Just since we're talking through some of this stuff, we can keep an eye on news for everybody. I'm scrolling through. I haven't seen any breaking news. Anything jump out at you that's come up in the last 10, 15 minutes that we
did get the 76ers starting lineup. Joe Reed is in there, which I don't know if has he been starting for them? But other than that, no news really to confirm.
Okay. Kind of concerned about, say that again. Yeah, no, I mean, just looking at his last 15 minutes last time out, didn't play before that, 9 minutes, 4 minutes. So definitely not been getting a significant amount of time there. What it does concern me is on my Furkan Korkmaz shares now, though. Guy who's, certainly getting a decent run. I hope that I'm still getting my 25-ish minutes out of him. Do you think it has an impact on him, the fact that he's not going to be starting there? Or is it just maybe actually an uptick since he'll be coming off the bench, maybe a little bit more featured in the second unit?
Yeah, I think his minutes should be pretty safe starting or coming off the bench. The guy who I would be more concerned about is Niang, right? Niang has played over 31 minutes in 3 straight games. So with him not starting, it seems unlikely that he will reach that threshold again, which definitely bums me out a little bit. Because I have no Joe Reed. So that's just fantastic.
I'd be shocked if I had any of them either. So hopefully that's one that doesn't bite us too
Paul
much.
Reed.
Hopefully he's
I
just
don't even
in and
know
out.
the guy's name. It's Paul Reed.
Paul Reed, Isaiah Joe, they're all mesh
Yeah.
them together. It's the same guy. Come on, let's not split hairs over inconsequential players here, guys. I see the chat's calling us out on that. All right, let's jump back over to Prize Picks here real quick. Let's take another couple off the board here. We've got some time to go through some of these, and they're our great sponsor. It's a great site too, guys. We mentioned it before. You can get them on all your favorite app stores. You can also just play on the site at prizepicks.com. It's pretty straightforward to find them, and it's a killer site. If you use the promo code Awesemo, you get up to $100 first deposit match. Awesemo, all caps. So jump over there, check out Prize Picks. I encourage it. We have a lot of fun talking about this site and playing on the site. Let's see. A game that hasn't started yet. Guy that came up quite a few times during our conversation. He's got a higher rebounding prop than one of his teammates. I'm curious what you think and who you would pick here. 7 rebounds for Jason Tatum or 8 rebounds for the guy I was looking at first, Al Horford. Which of those do you like better?
Oh, I thought you were gonna throw me Luka versus Porzingis.
Too.
I would, yeah. Horford getting over 7 rebounds does seem pretty within the realm of possibility, right? Like he has had a 15 rebound game this season. He's coming off 8 in his last game. I think 7's a pretty fair number for that. I'd be interested to see what Alex grades that one out as. I'd be more interested in taking the over on Horford. If you look at his game log, he's had at least 10 rebounds in 6 of 7 games. So he's pretty consistently hit double digits. He did only grab 7 in his last game, but that looks like a bit of an outlier, from what we've seen from him so far this season. So I would pick the over on Al Horford.
All right. I like that one. Hey, we've got a super chat that we'll address real quick from Corey Balmer here. Sent us $2. I appreciate that. Corey, he's asking on DraftKings, Tatum and Capella or Westbrook and Carmelo?
I think I like the first one. You just know that my hesitation is with Tatum, right?
Yeah.
But I don't love Carmelo at his current price tag. That's for sure. So I will lead the Melo side. But again, if you told me it was Jimmy Butler, then I would be much more interested.
Yeah, and we talked about Capella. We both liked him. So I think for me, it would also be on the former, maybe with a little bit less hesitation on the Tatum side. But I'm with you on that. And yeah, I'm with you on Melo. If it was Melo from probably before he came to the Knicks, if you can get Melo from the Nuggets in his first couple of years of his career, maybe you take him there.
If he comes out in a hoodie, 100% Melo. If we're getting a hoodie Melo, then you load up. Other than that, I'm fine with fading him at 5,800.
Good call. Good call. Love it. All right. So let's see what else is on the board over at Prize Picks here that we can talk about. Let's jump back over to let's take a look at a lot of narrative about guys not getting to the line quite as much this season. What do you think about 4 free throws made for Luka Doncic?
Yeah, right. It has been very, honestly, I find it refreshing. One of my least favorite aspects of the NBA was just how much guys hunted for free throws, at this point. So like the Chris Paul and, he's on the slate. Sorry, Chris, I'm not taking pot shots, but when you dribble in front of the guy and then stop and it's just so unnatural. I hated that. Let's get those out of the game. Anyway, back to Luka. He's at 5.3 free throw attempts per game. So that's a decrease from last year, but it's not like a massive decrease. We're not looking at a James Harden type situation where he's gone from double digits to 3. He went from 7.1 to 5.3 in terms of free throw attempts per game, and he's making less than 4. He does seem like a candidate for some free throw shooting progression. He's at 69% from the line. Luka's a better shooter than that, but I still think 4 is a bit optimistic considering how infrequently he's getting to the line, right? We kind of need him to shoot 80% or better if we're going to play the over on 4 free throws, and he's never shot 80% from the free throw line in his career. So I would lean under on that.
Okay. Like that. Solid little line there. That's you wouldn't think only 4, but yeah, That comes up solid the way that you read off those numbers, especially with the slight decrease, but it's enough of a decrease where that percentage really makes a difference. Since you mentioned him, I'll throw out Chris Paul. 2 free throws made.
Yeah, we love the under on his scoring prop, so I can't recommend then also taking the over on his free throw prop. But for what it's worth, CP3 averages 3 made free throws per game this season. He's a much better free throw shooter than a guy like Doncic, right? He's a guy that can be over 90% from the free throw line, and he's only at 80 to start the year. So if anything, you might see him make more free throws moving forward. So I do think that this line is low, but it would be weird. I would want to correlate my card, like I would not want to play a Chris Paul under on his scoring prop followed by a Chris Paul over on his free throw prop.
Sure. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. You don't want to split the baby that way and take 2 halves of something that doesn't add up to a whole. So I agree with you there. I do like that line though. I think it's a sneaky little one that is easy enough to see that going over, right? Not the end of the world if Chris Paul makes 3 free throws.
He needs to draw 2 fouls essentially. If he draws 2 shooting fouls, you're probably going to win this prop.
Right, exactly. And a savvy player like that, you mentioned him as the culprit that was doing a lot of things that we don't like. So that it's out there, and it gets a couple bonus whistles than we've seen so far this year. I think there's a clear path to getting to that one. But I'm with you too on the changes. I mean, I grew up a Knicks fan in the 90s, so I greatly prefer contact and defense and knocking somebody on their ass when they drive the lanes. So I like to see some changes to get away from the light touch free throw focused basketball we've seen recently.
Yeah.
Just jumping around.
To be fair, I am not one of those guys, right? Like I like most of the changes that have happened in basketball. I love the 3-point shooting. I love the pace and the space and everything, but the acting is what really got to me. Yeah. Right. It
was becoming
when guys are drawing contact and it looks like they're getting hit by a sniper, that's a problem. So
right. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I do like the pace, and I do love the threes, especially. Is just fascinating basketball. But it's getting it to the point where it's turning into soccer with the flopping was a bit too much. So let's see. Any questions? Any news coming up in the Discord, guys? Let's see. Just getting my last crunch in. It's not really a question. A lot of concern about the Korkmaz minutes. A lot of concern about the Korkmaz usage. A lot of people saying that they're jumping over, getting from Korkmaz, trying to get over to Maxey, trying to get over to Shake. Is that something that you'd be looking to pivot off? I know we touched on Korkmaz a little bit when that news first broke, but were there any changes that you made? Were you trying to get off of any shares and onto any shares of like Maxey or Shake?
I still feel pretty good with my Korkmaz exposure. I never had him projected as like a 30-minute guy, and I still think he can play 24, 26, 28 minutes even off the bench, and that's really what we care about is he's going to get the minutes. He's an excellent per minute producer, and he's underpriced. So the fact that he's not starting, if it lowers his ownership, to me, that's a plus.
Yeah, and we were already getting him at pretty significant positive leverage. So I'll take that. And that's kind of what I think the news and my willingness to stick with him is paying for in that situation, right? I'm gaining a little bit by hopefully other people jump ship. If it goes down in flames, it goes down in flames. But it's a specific decision that we can make with time to make it. Soul Dope 1234 sent us $1.99 super chat, asks on FanDuel, do we want I'm assuming this is Joel Embiid, Joel and Bridges, or Al and Melo? What? All right, it's a 3-way. Joel and Bridges, Al and Melo, or Robert with DeRozan. Good luck decoding that. I assume Joel Embiid and Michael Bridges.
That's a tough
right?
one because there are players in all of those that I like and players in all of those that I really dislike. Miles Bridges to me is like a clear fade on this slate, but I love Joel Embiid. I'm gonna lean towards the Robert Williams and DeRozan side. I think that with that pairing, you have 2 guys that can both give you 40 plus, and you can't say that about any of the other pairs.
Yeah, and thinking in terms of how my lineups were coming out, and I'm building on FanDuel, those are definitely out of those 6 names, the 2 names I was seeing the most by far. So getting them as a pairing, I probably have a significant amount of that pairing. So that's definitely going to be the way I would answer that as well. Guys, we need 15 likes to hit that 500 like threshold. We've got 739 out there. I know for sure that all of you haven't hit that like button yet. So give us a few more likes before we break for the night. We're trying to take some questions here in the end. We're trying to honor our commitment to our great sponsor Prize Picks and talk about their site at the same time. So we'll jump back over to them in a minute. Theodore Parsons said, yeah, we think Niang and Korkmaz is going to play in the second unit. We did say Niang maybe is the guy that takes a little bit of a ding there. So maybe watch out for that. But I think that's a reasonable expectation.
Right. Again, what matters here, guys, is the 76ers have 8 guys. Yeah. Maybe 9.
Yeah, exactly. They might call me to suit up. So take a look here. Let's see. Jumping back over to Prize Picks. 2 guys that we talked about cannibalizing one another, not playing them in the same lineups on other sites. Probably don't want both of these, but looking at rebounds for the Portland guards, they've got the same line, 4 rebounds for either one of them. You like either one of them to get over that? And which one would you prefer if you had to pick one of the 2?
I believe Lillard is the better rebounder of the 2. I'm just going to pull up the sort of the numbers here to start. Right now, Lillard's at 4.2 rebounds per game. I'm sorry, McCollum's at 4.2 rebounds per game. Lillard at 3.9. I would bet that that's an outlier number for Lillard, for McCollum. He's been right around 4 the last couple of years. All right, so he's a better rebounder than I'm giving him credit for. Shout out to you, CJ McCollum. I still think I'm taking Damian Lillard. We've seen those games where Dame can hit the glass and he'll finish with a weird 4 rebound game. I mean, he's been for the last handful of years over 4 boards, 4.2, 4.3, 4.6, 4.5, 4.9. So he can board. He can board for his size. I think he's a better rebounder than McCollum, despite what the numbers have said to start the year. So I would go over on Dame if I was picking an over on one of those 2.
I like that. And I like the just quick recall and how frequently are you ever talking about those 2 guys and their rebounding numbers? And you had it. You were right there. So that's great. And pretty solid line at 4, I got to say. That makes those a tough decision. I would imagine, I'm not looking at our board right now, but I would imagine those are right around coin flips with those averages. Guy that we touched on a couple times, but his night kind of changed when we got the J-Rich news is Dennis Schroeder, 15.5 point projection on Prize Picks. That game starts up in about a half an hour. Is that one that you're looking to maybe target the under on Dennis Schroeder's point scoring projection?
I don't know if I would be actively looking to target the under, but I think that it would probably scare me off of the over. There still is an opportunity for Schroeder to play around 30 minutes without Jalen, in the lineup tonight. And let's see. We have Schroeder has averaged. Sorry, I'm typically faster at this. All right, Schroeder's only at 14.1 points per 36 minutes with Brown off the court this season. So maybe that does stand out as an appealing under because he's not playing 36 minutes. That's for sure. So yeah, after doing a little quick research, I'm now interested in the under on that.
All right, love it. I sold him. So let's see. I've only had profit off of doing that. Jeez. Oh, there's another site I didn't. I forgot to check my IPOs. Anyway, going back to our pals' Prize Picks here. Let's see if we can find one more on the board before this slate locks. Do you have any that you want to call out that have been standing out to you that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I mean the one thing I'll double back on is I think you want one of these Philly guys, right? Somebody on Philly is going over tonight. You have to decide who it's going to be. I think if I had to pick, it would be Seth Curry at 16.5. He's seen the usage bump without Tobias. We have no real concerns about his scoring ability or his health like we do with Embiid. So again, he's the sort of the Philly guy I'm picking. It's not grading out all that well in the player prop tool. We have that as sort of a coin flip, but I'm okay being on Curry Island, right? I think that when you're just sort of diving into the dynamics of this slate, like Philly is a team that someone is going to outperform their expectations. So I like the idea of taking a stand on one of those three guys. Doesn't have to be Curry. If you prefer Maxey, that's cool. If you prefer Embiid, that's cool. But Curry's the way I'm leaning.
Yeah, and somebody's going to be scoring the ball for that team tonight. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Get one of them into your life.
Won't be Paul Reed. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, he's not the one we're looking for. Scrolling down to the bottom of the board, I'll make this probably our last one before we jet. Norm Powell. We talked about him a little bit going back to that Portland team. We talked about him a little bit in terms of filling the void a little bit on scoring. He's got a 17.5 point line. It seemed like it was maybe a little high, and it looks like the site likes him to go under. Is that one that you're maybe looking at as a viable under play?
Yeah, I think, again, if I was going to take that under, I would correlate it with Lillard over, right? The easiest way for Norm to go under tonight is for Lillard to have a Dame Lillard game, because that's really what has driven the Powell production recently. It's just that Dame has been so bad, right? And Powell has scored 22 or more in 3 straight. So if you want to take the under on him, I think the scenario that you have to tell yourself on that happening is that Dame has the breakout game, and I'm going to correlate those up together.
Love it. And that's a great way to think about putting these cards together in terms of just, all right, if I make this one in this spot, what else can I do that plays off of that? So it's a great strategy for putting these together. You give the people a lot tonight, Matt. I got to say, killer job, man. That's been awesome. Hopefully everybody out there is putting together prize picks lineups. Hopefully everybody's got their entries and is making their late swaps. And remember, guys, stick around. We got another, 2.5 hours before that last game of the night locks. So we've got some AD news still coming. We've got all kinds of late swaps we're going to have to make. Should be some fun. We've got a ton of shows coming up for you tomorrow, guys. Nothing else on the board tonight. Not that I know of anyway. But tomorrow morning, bright and early, get here early. Over on the odds channel, we've got the betting show starting up at 9 a.m. On the DFS channel right here, we've got the NFL First Look show starting up also at 9 a.m. That one's with Josh and Adam. That rolls into the NFL Deeper Dive with Lofty, Alex, and Ben at 10 o'clock. That one rolls directly into Live Before Lock with Eric, Matt Savoca, Matt Gajeski. We've also got a fantasy football show over on the Fantasy Football channel starting up at 11:45. So if you're more of a season-long player, we've got content for you over there telling you who to get in your lineups, what last-minute picks you can get. If you're like me, you've probably forgotten to pick up a streaming defense or a streaming kicker this week. So we're going to tell you how to do that. And we're not going to be done there after the football slate locks, guys. We've got 2 p.m. NASCAR Live Before Lock. We've got 5 o'clock. We're coming back for the Deeper Dive for basketball, 6 o'clock Live Before Lock for basketball, and then 7 o'clock, we're going to be back for the NFL Showdown Live Before Lock. We've got wall-to-wall fantasy sports content tomorrow, guys. We appreciate you helping us get to 500 likes. We appreciate EMAC. This is why he's going to be a great president in 2024. He's in the chat reminding everybody to set their clocks back tonight. Over 500 likes. Hit it if you haven't already. We're going to get out of here, guys. We really appreciate you, everybody hanging out with us.